to thank you, looking at state employees, to know that we have state stewards that are visionary and take on more work than what's been given to them by their boss. So tonight, officially, this award recognizes you for extraordinary efforts in assisting a partner in our fight against aquatic invasive species. So congratulations.
I'll just add in, the city Parks and Rec staff, Carla Belsky and Maria, you guys are really the backbone of that program. Inspections go. So it's been a great working relationship, and Mike brought us all together and got it dialed in now. Some days it's a little bit busier than others, but thanks, Mike.
And gentlemen, on behalf of the mayor, he wanted me to mention that there is no more valuable partnership than we, the city, have with you, particularly in this endeavor. It is incredibly important to this city, and I know you know how important it is, and we couldn't thank you enough. So thank you so much for all you've done. All right. Next up on our agenda is again one of those pleasurable things that we get to do occasionally around here. I get to read on behalf of the city of Whitefish a proclamation. Whereas Nicole Heverland, a Whitefish, Montana native and former USA All-American at the United States Military Academy, was chosen to represent Team USA in the women's rugby at the Tokyo 2021 Summer Olympics. And whereas Nicole was a multi-sport standout at Glacier High School, where she first picked up rugby as a freshman before playing Division I college basketball at West Point. And whereas, while Nicole relocated to California to train full-time with the elite training at the Elite Athletic Training Center alongside fellow Olympians, she still calls Whitefish home and returns often to spend time with family and enjoy mountain biking, fly fishing in the Big Sky State. And whereas Nicole is a strong proponent off the field for health and local entrepreneurship, she has facilitated co-branded opportunities to advance Whitefish businesses and causes. Whereas Nicole is proud of her Whitefish roots and looks forward to proudly representing her hometown in the global stage for Team USA in Tokyo this summer. Now wherefore, I, Frank Sweeney, Deputy Mayor of the City of Whitefish, on behalf of John Mulfeld, Mayor of the City of Whitefish, and this council, have the distinct honor of proclaiming July 23rd, 2021 as Nicole Heverland Day throughout Whitefish, and encourage all citizens, businesses, and institutions to follow her example of healthy living and Whitefish pride, whether here at home or across the globe. And with that, good luck, Nicole. All right, at this time, we now we move on to communications from the public. At this time, is there anyone who wishes to speak to the council on any matter that is not a public hearing this evening? Toby.
name is Toby Scott. I live at 1478 Barclay Lane. You have a copy of this speech in front of you. I forgot to sign it or put my name on it, but it starts with affordable housing, City Council, 7/19/2021. I'm addressing you on the subject of affordable housing in Whitefish. I'm talking about affordable rental units for the service and other casual workers needing a place to live. I proposed a plan of action 2 weeks ago at your last meeting and would like to remind you to please address this issue. There is a way to this end, a consortium between the City of Whitefish and an association of local businesses for the purpose of developing a housing project to create the needed units for these workers. Funds for this project may be available through the COVID relief money, TIF funds, the resort tax, and perhaps from the Explore Whitefish Fund, as I don't think we need to advertise for more people in Whitefish to visit, and private businesses willing to put money into this effort. At this time, I propose that the City Council appoint a steering committee to address this, made up of a member of the City Council or Planning Board, Chamber of Commerce, Housing Authority, several businesses, and members of the public interested in getting this started. This committee should investigate property locations and costs, cost of city services to these locations, cost of temporary housing, cost of permanent housing units, and other related issues facing the project. You should seek out these public and private business people, find out who is interested, and appoint this committee. As a member of the Planning Board and interested citizen, I am willing to be a part of this group and aid in the recruitment of members. Regarding your motivation for this, I have spoken with, directly or indirectly, several interested business owners and a general contractor who has volunteered to work on this project. This is just as of today. I believe now is the time to move forward. This will take some time, years before completion, but every journey starts with the first step. I hope you will take that step now. Thank you.
Thank you, Toby. Any other member of the public? Please. Name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is David Martin. I live at 816 Texas Avenue. I was here 2 weeks ago also to address an event of noise which occurred on June 26th. You probably remember my email afterwards. I promise not to get excited. I tend to get excited. I'm not mad, especially since the levels from Tap House since then have been low. They've been fine. If June 26th hadn't happened, I never would have been in front of the council. And if it continues to be that way, you know, or even if I'm inconvenienced once a year, so be it. I got it. But I found it interesting, and I'm sorry John isn't here. I'm going to quote him. His email back to me said, "I'm sure this will be a topic of discussion once again for the council." So I guess the question is, how many times have you discussed this? How many times are we going to deal with this in the future without doing anything about it? 52 years ago, I worked for a mechanic. His name was Ron. He said, "Dave, repair it right, or you're going to have to repair it again." So how many times do you guys want to hear about this before you do something? I come with a recommendation. You know, if you don't feel like you know what you're doing, you're hesitant to do something. I got it. I got this app downloaded. It's free. Download the app. There's several of them, decibel meter apps. As you're going around town, and you hear a jackhammer or you hear construction, bring up your app and take a look. See what you would feel comfortable with having this meeting over a 76 dB level. That was the level that I measured when I was trying to eat dinner outside of my house on June 26. Just find out for yourself what that feels like and whether you'd like to do it. It's just a recommendation. Again, I think if you familiarize yourself with noise levels, you might be able to say, that really is too much. Other recommendation, if you don't, have the time for that, I understand. Maybe fund a dB meter for the police. I see. Well, the police chief was back there. I'm sure he reports to you all from time to time. How many noise complaints did you have? And did you take the dB meter out there and measure it? And, what was it at the level that people found distressing? That, a couple of things to try and familiarize yourselves with the noise levels. And, I suspect you're just going to have to keep on dealing with this issue until somebody sets some level that says, that's beyond the pale. We gotta put a limit on this, and the police have to have a tool in their pocket to be able to go out and say, this boom box on the beach is scaring people away, and I'm measuring so many dB, and you have to turn it down. That's, my thought. So thank you very much, and once again, thank you all for your service. I know there are better things you'd like to be doing than spending your evenings here, so thank you.
David, thank you so much. Anyone else? Please.
Good evening. My name is Sophie Albert. I live at 32 Pheasant Run.
And I'm Gretchen Boyer at 286 Rusty Spur Trail.
I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of North Valley Food Bank, and we sent a letter to the City Council because COVID-19 has shown how fragile our country's food system is and how the supply chains really have crashed during the pandemic. Therefore, we really need to strengthen our local food systems here in the Whitefish area proactively. Because of that, Farmhands Nourish the Flathead and my wonderful colleague Gretchen and I from North Valley Food Bank propose the use of American Rescue Plan Fund Acts for a food resource and education center here in the city of Whitefish. That center would include food processing facilities, a demonstration farm, a community seed library, meat processing facilities for wild game processing, a nonprofit incubator space, and cold and warehouse space. This investment in local food infrastructure would reduce our risk in future emergencies like the COVID-19 pandemic or the raging wildfires around us, and also increase our capacity to plant, grow, and distribute local food.
Sophie covered that pretty well. So Farmhands, our mission is to build a strong community food system that fosters socially just ways of accessing food. And so we see this partnership as a way to strengthen our community food system here in Whitefish and the Flathead Valley. And so what we're really proposing in our letter, we know that you're looking for ideas for the American Rescue Plan funds, and our proposal is to foster this idea first, and then come to you guys with a more solid proposal, because right now we've been talking with partners like The Wave, local farmers, both Two Bear Farms and Wicked Good Farm. We've been meeting with the North Valley Hospital Foundation and thinking of what can a food hub, food resource center look like in Flathead Valley. We feel like this is the time. There's funds available for us to do such a project like this. And when we think about, just further what Sophie said, the pandemic, we found that grocery stores were empty from toilet paper to chickens, everything you could imagine. Montana, we grow a ton of wheat. We had a hard time finding Montana wheat in Whitefish. We finally got it. It's time to start thinking about that more proactively. So what we propose is putting together a more detailed partnership plan for this food resource center as a possibility for the American Rescue Act funds. So, and I guess we'll talk about that letter at the end of the meeting. But we wanted to just put that up there. So thank you.
Good. Thank you so much. Anyone else?
Rhonda Fitzgerald, 412 Lupfer Ave. There's also a letter in your packet at the end from the neighbors on my block of Lupfer Avenue. And I think now is when you make a comment about that, is that right? So we all live on the block of Lupfer Avenue behind the post office, which ends in a cul-de-sac by Riverside Park. And this year especially, we have found that people are parking in the cul-de-sac and blocking it. So it's designed so that the fire truck can turn around or anyone else can. And they're parking very large rigs, usually the small camper RV things, in the cul-de-sac. And so the request is that the city put up some no parking information in the cul-de-sac proper, and also enforce the no camping on the street, because we have become a unofficial campground at night. And it's really a problem. And also I would like, so my next door neighbor circulated a petition, and it's the letter you have in your packet, and every neighbor on our block signed it. I would also like to point out that in addition to people camping and parking in the cul-de-sac, we also are being impacted by employees from downtown who can no longer move their car all the time downtown, and they're parking in the residential areas all around. And my understanding was that when the parking plan was adopted, there was to be a concurrent residential parking permit for those neighborhoods close to the downtown area. But there's no residential parking permit in place, and we're getting a lot of employees parking on our streets. And so I would just hope that there's some small solutions to this, because it's become really a huge aggravation, as you can see, that everybody promptly signed Patty's petition. So thank you, and this is my across-the-street neighbor.
Thank you, Rhonda. I'm Alice Cabell. I live at 415 Lupfer. So I, too, am here to support. I think specifically, if we could have some signage on the cul-de-sac that asks, you know, this is residential parking only, that would be a simple solution. And you know, we get people just flying down and I think our situation is unique because we are a very short block and we are a cul-de-sac. So people come down, flying down the street thinking they can go across the river, which of course they cannot, and then they get to the end of the cul-de-sac and they quickly turn around. We have animals on the street, we have, you know, pets, we have children, and it's frightening, honestly. So, and then of course the parking issue. So if there's some signage we could put up that would just ask people to please respect that this is a residential neighborhood and not public parking spaces. So, and I think a lot of people get frustrated because they go to the Riverside Park and they want to get down to the river and they can't, so they park in our neighborhood and then use that as their access. But again, if there's an emergency, the police couldn't get around, ambulances couldn't get around because of the parking in the cul-de-sac. So, thank you.
Great, thank you so much for bringing that to our attention.
Hello, my name is Mark Owens. I live at 329 Shady River Lane, and I was here about a month ago regarding the wastewater facility concerns, and primarily about the transition when we go to the new system. So, as I said last time, I think I was out of town for part of June, and I think Kelly Talsma and Chris met with Dana regarding the issue, and I think I missed a few days in June at the beginning, but certainly in July we've had a little more of the smell coming over. Again, I don't think any of that transition activity is actually happening yet, so this isn't a good sign, I guess is the point, and we just want to make sure that, Craig sent me an email, and I appreciate that, and I've got some information there, but I think what we need is more specifics in terms of how the transition is happening, in terms of the dates, and what dates we would be at risk for some of the highest risk of smell, so we could basically leave. I mean, that's really what I want to do. I don't know about my neighbors, but most of what we're seeing now is kind of what we saw a couple years ago, which is late at night, we get a smell that came through the neighborhood, and it also kind of travels down behind Super One there too. So, but it seems in July we've got some more days that are happening like that. And again, since nothing is going on in terms of the transition activity, this is just not a good sign. And I think what we're trying to do is prepare, for that. And so part of that would be, is there an escalation contact we can have that we would call? Somebody, maybe it's Craig, I don't know if it's Craig or if it's somebody in his office, say, hey, we've got a problem. And, it's bad sometimes. And as I said last 2 years ago, when we had this issue, it was horrendous some days. Haven't experienced that myself, and I think it's gotten better this year. But again, I want to make sure that we have somebody to talk to. Before we used to talk with, Melissa Hartman. Melissa was a person who would come out, and she'd actually come to the neighborhood and kind of experience it herself. So she really kind of took it on as something that she, personally was addressing. So we'd like to have a phone number of somebody if we can call them. I don't expect anybody to be calling at midnight or anything like that, but unfortunately, most of the time we smell this is when we're opening our windows to get the fresh air at night. And, we're a good mile away, so it doesn't make sense that it's traveling that far. There's something going wrong when that's happening with the facility. And the other part was on the contractor that's actually, moving over to the new system. What's their accountability? Is there something that they've drafted in terms of mitigation plan? If things go wrong, what is it that they're on the hook to do? And that may cost them money. And so that's the thing that also would like to know is there a mitigation plan that the contractor's on the hook for financially if things start to go south? And then another thing, and Craig actually offered this last year or the year before, a tour of the facility. I just like to get a tour with some of our neighbors so we can kind of see the new technology that's being used and how that's actually going to improve our lives around the area there. And I think overall, as I said before, I think it's a good thing for Whitefish. I think that this move to the new type of wastewater treatment is necessary, and we just want to make sure the transition goes smoothly. That's primarily our concern. So anyway, thanks again for your, I want to reiterate what the gentleman said before. Thanks for your service.
Thanks, Mark. Anyone else wish to speak to the council this evening on a matter that is not on our public hearings? All right. With that, I think we'll close the public hearing portion of our meeting and move on to communications from volunteer boards. Any members of the audience here to report on a volunteer board? Any member of, come forward.
Deputy Mayor Sweeney, councilors, good to see all of you. I'm here, my name is Richard Hildner, 104 5th Street. I'm here as a trustee of the Whitefish Community Library. Parking seems to be a theme, and so I'm going to follow up on that particular theme. As more and more people are enjoying the Tuesday farmers market, it puts additional pressures on the patron parking spaces in the library and at the library. So the library is open until 6 p.m. on Tuesdays, and around 4 o'clock, the library parking lot starts to fill up. And one would hope it was all patrons coming in to check out books, read books, use computers or whatnot, and that would appear to be so because quite a number of people apparently pull in at about 4 o'clock, walk into the library, and enjoy the coolness of the library, the air conditioning, and right at 5 o'clock when the market opens, they all exit. And thus the parking spaces remain full. So that's one of the problems that we have observed at the library. Joey, our librarian, puts out a sign that's in orange cones to also inform the public that it's the library-only parking, and in hopes that someone will pay attention to that. It doesn't seem to be often the case. As soon as the library, or as soon as just before the parking issue exacerbates itself, people start to circulate. So as soon as that parking lot is full, it's a merry-go-round in the library parking lot, waiting for someone to vacate a parking space. Joey observed just last week that both handicap parking spaces were filled, and then somebody pulled into the hash-marked parking spaces. Also, she informed one person that, wait a minute, this is handicap parking. They had a sticker, but they parked where the van accessible hash marks are. They left. The next person came in, also with a handicap parking sticker, and they said, well, it's marked handicapped. I should be able to park wherever there's blue paint, or words to that effect. One would think that if you have a handicap parking sticker, you would understand what it means to have handicap parking available. The other issue that has become readily apparent, and that is that the loop in front of the library that has red paint and is marked fire lane only has become a very nice shady spot for people to park as well. And I'll get to that issue. And we assumed at first it was people who stopped quickly just to return books, but when they stayed there long enough and one vehicle was approached and said, oh no, we're just parked here so we can eat the food we just bought at the farmer's market. And they were informed that it was in fact a fire lane and they were parking illegally. The other issue that is attendant to all of this is that last week Joey tried calling the police, but the call went to dispatch and she was put on hold for several minutes. She tried a couple of individual law enforcement numbers, phone numbers for officers that she had, and still no answer. And she was reluctant to call 911 for a parking violation, and rightfully so. Next, she called the fire department, and there was no answer. Out of desperation, she tried to get a hold of Hill Brothers. And again, the answering machine picked up, and she left a message. The next day, police called instructing her to call a certain number, which was exactly the same number and extension that she had been given previously. I want to not just complain, but I want to offer some suggestions as to how and possible remedies. First, repaint the handicap parking spaces stripes and curb blue. Straighten the 2-hour parking regulation signs that have been tipped at about a 30-degree angle where people have backed into them, where it says library parking only. 3, police presence would be helpful. There's often a patrol car or two in the lot at 4 p.m. when the Jersey barriers are placed. And they're there to make sure that nobody parks on the east side of Depot Park. As soon as the barrier is in place, the police leave and the parking lot at the library for patrons fills. Perhaps the police presence could last a little longer. 4, repaint all of the parking spaces in the library parking lot. 5, give Joey a number that actually works without calling 911. Ticket offenders. That was number 6. Number 7, consider giving Joey a book of those obnoxious orange warning stickers that are so difficult to remove. They say you are in violation of a city ordinance, blah, 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 blah. And I think that might make an impact as well. And 8, ask market managers to staff the library parking lot from 4 to 6 to inform market goers of the parking regulations and that it is for parking for the library from 4 to 6. So I thank you for your attention to the matter. I will leave you with my wish list of potential options. Like everybody else, I do appreciate your service.
Thank you, former counselor. Any other public comment this evening, or any volunteer boards, I should say? Report from the audiences? Any volunteer board reports from the city council? Anyone? Seeing none, I think we'll move on now to our public hearings, or to our consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to accept the consent agenda as it is.
I'll second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? It passes unanimously, Michelle. On now to our public hearings. Our first public hearing, item A, is a consideration of a request from Dan Nelson for a preliminary plat to develop a 4-lot subdivision located at 736 Wisconsin Avenue, Zone WR2, two-family residential district. Wendy.
Okay, we'll see if this works. There goes Michelle. As I understand, if I plug it in, it should just come up. I think it's transferring. Okay, it's thinking. I was just going to show the preliminary plat on your screens. As you mentioned, this is a 4-lot residential subdivision located west of Wisconsin Avenue on East Marina Crest Drive. Each lot will access off a newly constructed East Marina Crest Drive west of Wisconsin Avenue. The lots are sized to accommodate either a detached single-family home or townhouse duplex. The subdivision will be required to pay a fee in lieu of parkland dedication. They're also proposing a 30-foot easement on the west side of Lot 1 to provide access to a lot to the south of this subdivision. No subdivision variances are being requested. Again, the property is located at 736 Wisconsin Avenue. It's currently vacant, and the property is zoned WR2. It has residential to the north and west and vacant to the south and east. It's served by all public services and facilities. We did notice adjacent landowners place illegal in the pilot, put signs out, all that good stuff. We did receive a couple of comment letters. Folks were concerned about what types of homes were going to be constructed, wanting to ensure that the zoning regulations are being followed, and the concerns with the change of elevation from the east side to the west side. We review subdivisions according to the criteria in the subdivision regulations. The fire marshal reviewed the project. He will approve placement and design of all fire hydrants. An additional hydrant likely will be required at the end of the road. All lots have frontage on East Marina Crest Drive. In 2018, with the development of the quarry to the north, you folks required full right-of-way easement granted to the city to the western edge of that property, but they only constructed the road through the access to their actual development. So this project will extend that road all the way to the west and terminate in a fire department approved turnaround. No TIS was required because it didn't trip the 200 trip threshold. This site has been graded and filled over the years. As you know, it used to be a gravel pit. Most of the lots are flat with an upward slope towards the west and south. The subdivision regulations indicate if development is greater than 10%, it does require a geotechnical. There's adequate area on a flat, but if they propose to do any development on anything greater than 10%, they will need to submit a geotechnical analysis, and we've suggested that as a condition of approval. The project is required to meet all stormwater requirements in the engineering standards, including detention and treatment. The layout does not show, and I don't know why this isn't coming up, but, oh, okay. There is no stormwater pond within the boundary of that plan, but they will have to meet all the stormwater requirements. And the standard condition that you may not end up with the final density continues to apply for drainage purposes. So again, the project will be required to construct the remainder of the road to the western edge of the property and sign it for future connection as per our subdivision regulations. They'll install full frontage improvements along the south side of the project where their subdivision is proposed, and then curb and gutter on the north side. They'll be installing street trees, and they are responsible for maintaining those boulevards, trees, and sidewalks. As far as Parkland dedication, their requirement is less than half an acre, so they will be paying a fee in lieu, and we will assess that at the time of final plat. The project does comply with the growth policy and the zoning regulations. The planning board held a public hearing on June 17th. A member of the public spoke at the public hearing with some concerns, and that's all in your packet with the minutes. The planning board did unanimously recommend approval of the subdivision, subject to 16 conditions of approval. Just to hit some of the highlights, again, the road, there we go. The Marina Crest must be constructed to the western edge of the property and signed for future street connection. They need to work with the Public Works Director in determining the exact alignment and how that road is going to be connected through, because someday it could connect through, and there's some topography, obviously, on the west side of that project. Geotechnical report must be submitted for review if any development occurs on slopes greater than 10%, and that's also a recommended note on the face of the plat. Paying a fee in lieu of parkland dedication would be kind of the other one. All the remainder conditions are kind of standard conditions of approval that you typically see. Can I answer any questions for you?
Any questions for Wendy? Wendy, I note from your staff report that one condition that would normally be associated with a development such as this, that no short-term rentals would be allowed. That is not the case here. I presume that these lots are available for short-term rentals?
No, the zoning is WR2. It's just our regular residential 1 and 2 family zoning district.
Okay.
Short-term rental is permitted to the north and to the west with the
Excellent.
quarry development, but this property is not part of that.
Okay, and why is there not a note or a condition that are assigned to this that identifies that?
That's just the regular requirement for all residential districts.
Great.
We don't usually add that type of a condition. In fact, I can't think of an instance when we have ever added that for a subdivision.
Okay. I'm
We do that for ADUs. We do add that for ADUs because they have a deed restriction. But
Right.
for just a standard, regular residential subdivision, we
Don't
never
need
done
to.
that.
Okay, great, thanks. Rebecca?
Just to clarify, WR2 means they can have duplexes?
Yeah, and
Okay,
the lots
'cause
are sized to accommodate that.
Yeah, and I thought I saw in one of the memos from a neighbor that they were worried about that density, but it is allowed. Okay, I just.
Yeah, the subdivision is meeting the zoning requirements.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Just so we're clear, is this developer proposing any deed-restricted affordable units?
No, they're not
for legacy-
obligated to.
For our legacy homes? Okay. How many would we have gotten out of a project like this?
It would have been 0.8 of a unit at 20% under the former regulations.
Okay, so ostensibly one unit
It would have been a fee in lieu of,
or a fee in lieu?
of a full unit, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Wendy. We advertised for a public hearing. I would offer the applicant the opportunity to speak first. If the applicant's here and wishes to speak to the council, please step forward.
Will McDonald, I live at 180 Fauna Road. I think Wendy did a really good recap there. The big thing here is a couple things. We did do a geo at the quarry. I'm also involved with that, obviously, and the ownership of this, so I can say that we flipped the entire site. So if that is a condition, that's not an issue whatsoever for further development of the Clark subdivision that we're trying to entitle right now. The other thing is important to note is that WGM did the road design for the current East Marina Crest, and we have contracted with them to continue this through. And one of the conditions of approval with the quarry was that it was, we had to actually do preliminary design to make sure, because it's my understanding that the city now has right-of-way to get over to Dakota, so we're going to be designing that to where it meets grade. So again, no issues with that. We've already done preliminary civil analysis, and we'll work with Craig, obviously, if this is approved. I guess that's really the high notes. Again, it would have been a cash in lieu. There wasn't if the Whitefish Legacy Act was still in force. So yeah, we're just trying to create some lots here. There was some concern of density. It's pretty much the exact same density as you see in Aspen Grove, where you see duplexes with single families. So that's what we're trying to mirror. That's off Colorado on the other side of Wisconsin Avenue. So again, it's mirroring the housing in the community. So with that said, if there's any questions from council, I can help to answer.
Any questions for the applicant this evening? Seeing none.
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, the very east end of the development you're leaving as an easement to potentially connect to the property to the south.
We're extending
road.
We're extending infrastructure to the end of our property.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I mean, that's a city road, and so it's being designed to city spec, and we're also building a retaining wall. So again, it's a lot of infrastructure going in that the future ownership will put in to adhere to the master traffic plan of Whitefish City.
Okay. All right, thanks.
So I guess it wouldn't require an easement because you guys have it, or you own the road, so yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Any other questions for that?
Sorry if I may. There is existing right-of-way to connect from the western portion of this roadway down to East Marina Crest.
Thanks, Craig. I think we're good, Will.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any member of the public wish to speak about this matter? I have a list here that says Mr. Mike Barnum might want to speak on this matter. If so, please step forward.
I own the property, Mike Barnum, 429 and 433 East Marina Crest. I own the property you would see at the left edge of this schematic. I guess question number one, when you're talking about retaining walls, where would this retaining wall be? I'm happy to ask the applicant or ask you to ask him. I mean, details have been sketchy.
Yeah. Mr. Barnum, this is a time for public to give comment. At this time, we don't answer questions from the public on these matters. We're happy to take your comments. We're happy to record your questions.
Okay, well, I mean, so here's my primary concern as an adjacent landowner is land damage, because as you can see, there is considerable slope from my lot to where they're probably going to be building. Moreover, that easement going to the lot to the south, which would probably be accessed either via that new road or off of Iowa, is about a 45-degree slope, which again, you know, I don't know the particulars about easements, but that would seem to be pretty impassable from pretty much every vehicle I've ever been in. So, you know, I don't know if easements need to be vehicle passable or not, but I'm just concerned about land degradation to my property. Period.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. We'll follow up. Anyone else wish to speak on this matter? Seeing none, I'll close this and turn it over to council for a motion, questions, or otherwise.
I guess my question remains about, if you look at the preliminary plat, there's a sliver at the what is the eastern edge of the four lots that my understanding was, Wendy, that this is set aside as an easement for the developer to eventually use to connect to the lot that is to the south, that is not under this.
Western side of Lot 1. The western side of Lot 1, there is a 30-foot wide easement to
Okay.
access that lot to the south, that it's not part of this development.
Okay, and
It's an adjacent owner.
if you look at the topography there by the map that I'm looking at, it goes from, in that area, there's over 25 feet of elevation change in that short little piece. So how does a road get built through that, would be my
I would leave that to
question.
the engineers to figure out.
Yeah, well, okay.
I couldn't say.
All right, and then the lot that's to the south of there is zoned what, WR2 as well?
It's the same zoning, yeah. Mhm.
Okay,
It's
right.
not part of this subdivision.
okay, thank you.
If I may ask one question?
Sure,
Wendy,
that's what we're here.
is that the only access point for the lot to the south?
I think so. They may own multiple, I don't know if they own lots around to the south, I'm not sure. But there's separate ownership. I don't think there's an obligation for them to provide this access, but they are.
Wendy, there's an obligation to ensure that this, whatever that lot is, does not become what I'll call landlocked with no
It
access.
already is landlocked. It currently is. The current configuration, there's a lot on the north and a lot on the south. It is landlocked.
And it has no access to
I don't
anything.
think it does. Do you know? Oh, maybe Will knows more.
Well, please.
That is a 30-foot utility easement to get access to that lot to the south. That lot to the south also has access to that cul-de-sac. It's under the ownership, if you look it up in GIS, that ownership, I think it might even be for sale right now for, I can't remember what the address is, but if you look on the GIS map, that ownership on that southern lot has direct access to the cul-de-sac. So if they wanted to parcel off that information or subdivide, you guys would, essentially it would come before you. So because we actually looked at possibly engaging that ownership to see if they would ever sell, and just never went anywhere. But that parcel, I'm pretty much 99% sure that it's not landlocked. It has access because there's a current house on it, and it's over an acre. And the ownership, if you look on GIS, it comes up under the same name.
Okay, thanks, Will.
Yep.
Dave and Wendy, I mean, we've had other issues with what I'll call retaining walls on related lots. Is there a way we're going to be able to answer Mr. Barnum's question about what was going to be allowed and how that's going to, how and what is going to interface with his property to ensure that there's not drainage or other problems?
I think it'll be part of the engineering plans that will be submitted.
Correct, yeah. The retaining walls would be shown in the future grading plans, which would be required. And that's something that Public Works would review and approve. So, I mean, in terms of, concerns about degradation of property, we obviously have a whole set of municipal codes that would work against that. But we will definitely look at the engineering plans when they come in and make sure everything that's being constructed can be done without detriment to the neighboring property. So right now, I don't know where, I assume that the retaining wall that was mentioned was really just intended to be at the end of the roadway, where the future grading won't take place until the road is continued. I don't think it's going to run that entire western lot line of that lot 1. It'll likely just be within the right-of-way or slightly out. But without a full set of engineering plans, we're not sure. But we will definitely review that to make sure the neighbors are protected.
Mr. Barnum, just so you know, we've had these issues before with lots that are uneven, and people have come in, and we've identified some problems over the years that we think we fixed. Craig has been instrumental in helping us ensure that we get the right answers here. If you have any concerns, I would hope that you would contact the planning department as well as Craig to see what's going on. So we'll be, I appreciate your concern, and we'll do what we can to help you. And with that, any other comments from the council, or can I have a motion?
May I ask a question of our planning staff?
Certainly.
What regulations do we have in place prohibiting landlocked lots like this, or do we? It just seems really peculiar to me that there is this now lot that's sitting there with no way to even get to it.
I mean, under subdivision, you know, every lot has to have access, but these lots were created probably not by subdivision. I mean, as I recall, it seems like there were brothers that were sort of involved in the property, and you can do family transfers. Those are exempt from subdivision review. So, I mean, if someone comes in for subdivision, there is a requirement to provide access. But if there's an existing lot of record, I mean, there's sort of nothing you can do. It is what it is. It's just existing. But if it does access off of, I think it's Iowa that's on the south side where that lot would connect to, then they do have access. But again, it is what it is. And, you know, when they come forward with a development request, then we'll ensure that there's access. And it isn't, you know, they're going to provide an easement, so it wouldn't technically be landlocked. It has an access point.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I would make a motion.
Please.
I would move to approve WPP 21-02, findings of fact, staff report, and the 16 conditions of approval as recommended to us by our very own Whitefish Planning Board as of their June 17, 2021 meeting.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion on this matter?
I'll just, since this is one of our few subdivisions that we've had in a while, and certainly the first one that's come in since the state eliminated our Legacy Homes program, I'll just put on the record that I am disappointed that we're not getting anything for our workforce housing, our Legacy Homes program out of this subdivision.
Thanks, Steve. With that, with no further comments, all those in favor? All those opposed, like sign. Motion passes unanimously, Michelle. Thank you. Our next item for public hearing is item B, consideration of a request from Heather Barnum for a conditional use permit to allow a guest house located at 810 Colorado Avenue, Zone WR3, low-density multifamily residential district.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, so this is a request to convert an existing accessory structure into a guest house in the WR3 zone on Colorado Avenue. The accessory structure is behind an existing single-family home and is accessed directly from Colorado Avenue with an existing driveway. The original structure lies on top of the rear property line, but was constructed before the zoning code. And so even though it encroaches into the rear setback, it's legally non-conforming. A 100-square-foot addition was constructed without a building permit in 2019, and it was also set right on that rear property line, which is in violation of the zoning code. Building inspectors discovered the addition, and an after-the-fact permit was issued that required the addition to be moved back out of the rear setback. That addition has not yet been moved, as the applicant wants to first connect sewer and water service, and she can't do that until she obtains the CUP for this guest house. The applicant will need a new building permit to convert the existing structure to living space. So right now it's an extra space used for crafts or whatever. The surrounding land uses are residential and commercial, with the WR3 zoning district to the north and the south, WR2, which is the two-family residential zoning district across Colorado Avenue to the east, and WB1 limited business district to the west. All are intended for an urban setting, and the limited business district is intended for commercial uses adjacent to residential uses. The growth policy designates this area as high-density residential, which is consistent with the WR3 zoning. A project notice was mailed to adjacent landowners within 300 feet of the property. A sign was posted on the property, and notices went out to advisory agencies. No comments on the projects have been received. The project was reviewed using the conditional use permit criteria in the zoning regulations. And overall, the proposed use does comply with the WR3 zoning district, and as conditioned will conform to the development standards for guest houses in the zoning code. The footprint of the original accessory structure plus the recent addition is less than 600 square feet, and so the accessory structure setbacks can be used. That's the 6 feet from the rear and the side property lines. And a condition of approval has been added that the addition must also be moved out of the rear setback. The property is over 12,000 square feet and complies with all the minimum lot size and lot width requirements in the zoning district, and all setbacks and lot coverage requirements can be met and will be confirmed at the time of the new building permit. No rent can be charged or received for guest houses in the WR3 zoning district, and so a recorded deed restriction is a condition of approval. If the applicant were to decide to live in the accessory structure, it would then become the primary structure or the primary residence, and the single-family home would become the guest house and can't be rented. So neither can be rented in that case. 3 off-street parking spaces are required, 2 for the single-family home and 1 space for a guest house that's less than 1,200 square feet. And there's plenty of space for that. One of the additional conditions is that the first 80 feet of the driveway be paved. The property has adequate availability of public services as it's serviced by city water and sewer, and it's within the jurisdiction of the city police and fire departments, accessed by public paved streets. In the staff report, I noted that the property had a non-functioning water meter needing replacement, and that was included as a condition of approval. And I checked with the water department this morning, and they confirmed that the water meter has been replaced. The guest house is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. The use is similar to existing uses in the neighborhood and should be consistent with the type of structures that are in the neighborhood. At the June planning board meeting, staff recommended approval of the conditional use permit application subject to several conditions of approval. The applicant spoke at the public hearing, but no other members of the public spoke. Planning board adopted the staff report with findings of fact and voted to recommend City Council approve the CUP with the 10 conditions of approval. Some of the highlighted conditions include the addition to the accessory structure must be moved out of the rear setback and meet all zoning requirements, and a new building permit must be obtained to convert the structure to living quarters. The applicant must pave the first 80 feet of the driveway. Prior to the building permit, the property must be deed restricted such that the guest house cannot be rented and short-term rentals are not permitted. And the rest of the conditions are fairly standard for guest houses. Do you have any questions that I can help you with? I know the applicant is here as well, if you have questions for her.
Any questions for Hillary? Seeing none, I think you're off the hook. If the applicant's here, before we, as part of the public hearing, I'd like to give the applicant first opportunity to speak to council.
Hello, I'm Heather Barnum, 810 Colorado Avenue. Originally started this project to just add a little addition onto the back property for extra storage and crafting space. So I just looked at the Sterling codifiers, saw 10 by 10 structure, didn't need a building permit, so I kind of just rogued out and found out when I went to get my electrical permit that I did it wrong, so I worked hard with TAD to rectify the situation, and COVID hit, so it has been a little delayed trying to find somebody to help me move that addition. So when I was in the middle of doing the addition, somebody said, if you ever want to put water in, you should do it now before the foundation goes in, so I'm here.
Great. Thank you, Heather. This is the time we set aside for a public hearing on this matter. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak on this matter? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and turn it back to council for a motion. And/or questions or discussion.
Make a motion that we approve WCUP 21-111 and the findings of fact and the conditions of approval.
I'll second.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 21-11.
Great, thank you. Motion made by Councilor Connell and seconded by Councilor Hennon. Do you wish to speak to your motion? Any other comments on the motion? All those in favor? All those opposed, like sign. Motion passes unanimously, and thank you very much. Next on our item for public hearing is item C, consideration of a request from Karen Bunker for a preliminary plat to develop a 4-lot subdivision located at the corner of O'Brien Avenue and Sawtooth Drive, Zone WR2, two-family residential district. And Wendy, thank you.
Again, this is a 4-lot residential subdivision on a little bit more than half an acre. The lots will each have frontage and driveways along O'Brien Avenue or Sawtooth, which are both city-maintained streets. They will pay a fee in lieu of parkland dedication, and no subdivision variances are being requested. Again, the property is unaddressed, located at the southwest corner of O'Brien and Sawtooth. Zone WR2, it's surrounded by residential uses. It's served by all public services and facilities. We noticed adjacent landowners placed a sign on the property, put illegal in the paper. We did receive some comments from concerns with neighbors about the impact of the project on the character of their neighborhood, lack of open space, and questions about drainage. We did receive another letter that's also included in your packet with similar concerns. Just like the other one, we review these according to the standards in the subdivision regulations. This is probably about the easiest subdivision you're ever going to see. All the roads are done, the sidewalks are in, the streetlights are in, everything is done on this particular subdivision. So it meets the fire department's requirements for emergency access. Again, all the lots have frontage on Sawtooth Drive, which is a public street. Lot 4 is sized to accommodate townhouse duplex. It's a 7,200 square foot lot. So if someone chooses to build that, we would grant a driveway permit off of O'Brien, but generally we want to see all the sidewalks or the driveways off of Sawtooth Drive. No traffic study was required because it's so small. Drainage was addressed with the development of O'Brien Bluffs as part of that 2007 subdivision approval. This lot was kind of considered, I think, as part of all the overall development. There's swales that are in front of those lots up there, and then the storm pond is on the other side of the street. So no further review of drainage is required for this particular subdivision. Again, all the streets meet all the standards, so there's nothing for them to do. And because the parkland dedication, again, is less than half an acre, they will pay a fee in lieu of parkland dedication. This parkland fee will go into the West District, and within this subdivision, just to the west of this particular neighborhood, there is a city park there, so potentially that could be an area where that funds could go. Up to the park board, of course, though. The project does comply with the growth policy and the zoning regulations. The planning board held a public hearing on June 17th. One member of the public spoke at the hearing, and those comments are included in the draft minutes. The planning board recommended unanimously for this project, subject to 9 conditions of approval. Again, the fee in lieu of parkland dedication would be paid at the time of final plat. And lot 4, if it is developed as a townhouse duplex, they may have one driveway off of O'Brien. Otherwise, all driveways will be off of Sawtooth Drive for this subdivision. Can I answer any questions for you?
Any questions for Wendy?
I have one.
Sure.
Steve? All the other lots in this subdivision are pretty big, aren't they?
No, there's some
O'Brien
lots that are
Bluffs?
about that same size. That was a question that came up. Kind of in the center of the O'Brien Bluff subdivision, there are lots that are very similarly sized, 6,400, 6,500, 6,600, and then there's lots that are bigger, of course, kind of wrapping around that subdivision, but it's kind of a variety of lot sizes in there, but it meets the zoning.
I go through there a lot. It's my new way around the four-way stop.
Yeah, yeah.
But I just, So it seems like the adjacent lots are all bigger, though, the ones across the street to the north, and
Yep.
certainly the lot to the south. Okay, thank you, that's all I
But it
wanted.
meets the zoning.
Yeah, I get you, I know, thanks.
Rebecca?
But currently, there's no duplexes in there,
But the zoning allows for it if there's 7,200 square feet.
right?
Yep.
And then, I was just talking about the character of the neighborhood is why I brought
And just
that
because
up.
the lot is sized to accommodate that, doesn't mean it's gonna happen.
True. So there was a lot of drainage issues when this was first being built, because I have friends that built into that area, and it was surprising how much problem they had. And I'm wondering, maybe Craig could address this, how has that been mitigated over the years? So that, because that did come up with the comments from some of the neighbors.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with any drainage issues in this subdivision. It is an interesting section of roadway because there's not curb and gutter or storm sewer. It's all conveyed via open channel. And so there may have been some original grading issues. Oftentimes when you're constructing roadways of this nature, there's some fine tuning that has to happen in the swales, but presently I'm not aware of any issues with stormwater management in the subdivision.
Any other questions for Wendy? Seeing none, we advertised for a public hearing on this matter, and I'd like to open up that public hearing now. If the applicant is here and wishes to speak to council, I'd like to give them the opportunity to speak first.
Deputy Mayor, members of the council, thank you. I'm Eric Youngquist. I'm Karen Bunker's husband. We're at 73049 Scout Lane in Arlee, Montana. All I'd like to say really is that this is the last remaining piece of family land. My wife's family, the Fulkersons, have lived on that land since the early 1900s. This is the last piece of it. And we've built ourselves a life down in Arlee. We don't have any intention of, unfortunately, living up here again. And it just seemed like the land would be better put to use for, obviously, our benefit, but as well for the city to provide more housing opportunities to be built. And that's pretty much all I got to say about it. The planning department has gone through it with us pretty well, and I think that there's not really any issues that I'm aware of, and that's all I got to say about it, I guess.
Thank you very much. Any other member of the public wish to speak to us about this matter? Seeing no movement, I'm going to close the public hearing and turn it back to council for a motion and/or questions.
I'll make a motion.
Right.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I would move to approve a request from Karen Bunker for a preliminary plat to develop a 4-lot subdivision located at the corner of O'Brien Avenue and Sawtooth Drive, Zone WR2, two-family residential, WPPP 21-01.
I will second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Do you wish to speak to your motion?
I don't think so.
Any other comments on the motion?
I will just point out that this is another subdivision where we get nothing in terms of our legacy housing program.
Well pointed out. With that, with no further comments from council, all those in favor, aye. All those opposed, like sign. You're opposed. Motion passes on a 4-1, 5-1 with Councilor Norton in opposition. Next on our public hearings is what I believe will be our ordinance 21-08, an ordinance rezoning approximately 3 acres of land located at 306, 312, 328, 334, 336, 406, 418, 426, 428, 436, and 442, 506, 514, 518, 532, 534, 558, and 564 Kalispell Avenue, Whitefish.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor and councilors. So yeah, the Kalispell Avenue neighbors
got together and they're proposing to rezone 3 blocks of the west side of Kalispell Avenue between East 3rd Street and East 6th Street from what is currently WR4, which is our highest density multifamily residential district, to our W2 zoning, which is our 2-family residential district. They're currently developed with a mix of single-family and 2-family homes. So the purpose of that is to basically protect the single-family residential character of that historic existing neighborhood, and also to match the WR2 zoning, which is on the east side of Kalispell Avenue, that abuts them across Kalispell Avenue. We basically got a petition from the majority of the homeowners on that whole side of the street, and they signed that petition, and according to the code, it requires 65% of the owners of the land area in a zoning district that's proposing a zone change, and they got about 76.69% of the homeowners to apply. So there were 4 homeowners in that district that did not sign the petition, about 23% of the land area. Several of the properties have a potential with this zone change to WR2 to be made non-conforming with regard to setbacks with this zone change. The setback requirements are a little different in the R2 between the R4. And so, for instance, the 20-foot setback in the WR4 zone becomes a 25-foot setback in the front. So there may be some homes that are built a little closer that maybe not become non-conforming. And then the rear yard setback moves from what's 15 feet to 20 feet. And then in general, just the size of the districts are a little bit different. With the R2, it's 6,000 square feet for a single family, 7,200 for a duplex, as Wendy mentioned. And then with the R4, it's 6,000 square feet for a single family dwelling and 1,000 square feet for each additional dwelling. And so with the current zoning the way it is, there's a potential there with R4 for people to build something bigger, but most of those lots aren't sized for that. And so the only chance of someone to build more than a duplex would have been for some lots to be consolidated, which is maybe one of the concerns from the neighbors. It's approximately 3 acres in size. As far as the zoning, I mentioned that. The growth policy designation, that zoning of R4 has been in effect since zoning went into effect in 1981. And then in 2007, we had a growth policy that called out that area as high-density residential, which it is right now, and that existing zoning is what's appropriate for that. Typically, high density is placed in areas that are abut commercial property. In this particular, all these properties along here, or most of them, abut commercial property directly to the west, which is our downtown WB3 zoning. In 2018, the downtown master plan amended the future land use of that area, calling it out as either low density or multifamily residential as its primary land use. So that within the growth policy, that did give the option for those property owners to look at a different zoning to reduce the zoning down to a 2-family district. So we did send out a public notice within 150 feet. We received about 16 comments. There's 3 on your table that came in later. There was only 1 comment opposed to it by one of the property owners that's within that district that said they bought the property because it was zoned WR4 and they wanted to keep it that way. So in order to do a zoning change, you do have to look under state law, Title 76, and different criteria. Is this made in accordance with the growth policy, as I mentioned, the future land use designation of the downtown master plan does call that out as a potential to be single-family zoning. While the future land use map in our 2007 growth policy maintained that as high-density residential, it was mentioned in the growth policy as an area that was inconsistently zoned with the existing houses in the neighborhood, and with the zoning allowing multifamily in an area that has historically single-family homes in it, and potential for buildings to be out of scale with that neighborhood. So the growth policy, recognizes the historic single-family uses on there that are more consistent with the historic neighborhood to the east, while acknowledging that placing single-family adjacent to commercial does potentially create some conflict, as we've seen in other areas in the town where we have single-family homes adjacent to commercial uses. Also in the growth policy, there are several goals and objectives. Goal 3.5 talks about protecting and preserving the special character, scale, and qualities of existing neighborhoods while supporting and encouraging attractive, well-designed neighborhood compatible infill. There's another goal that's preserve and protect historic buildings, neighborhoods, and landmarks in downtown Whitefish. And then recommended action 4 is, all zoning districts may be reviewed for conformance with the growth policy, and city or neighborhoods may initiate rezonings in order to bring zoning into compliance. So first finding is that while there are some concerns with single-family zoning being allowed next to commercial, the proposed WR4 from WR2, WR2 from WR4 does conform with the growth policy, complies with the land use designation of the downtown master plan and the goals of the growth policy. There's other things that we have to look at, is secure from fire and other danger, promote public health, and none of that's going to change with this zone change. So that's all those findings do support that, and there isn't any impact to the motorized or non-motorized transportation systems. One of the findings has to be, does this promote compatible urban growth? And again, I did mention there's a potential with that zoning, although it's been in place, that future conflicts with across the alley, but that area may redevelop into commercial uses. Those tend to have a high impact on adjacent single-family, generally high-density residentials. The buffer between commercial and single-family residential, which is what it has been in the past, but also, being more compatible with the adjacent single-family neighborhood that's also zoned WR2 seems to be more important in this situation, and so we do feel like the proposed zone change will promote compatible urban growth. And then looking at the character of the district, there's traditionally early 20th century homes on there. There is, of course, it's only one block off of a major highway, so there's a potential for some conflicts as that redevelops and expands in the future. But we do feel like that compatibility with the existing Kalispell Avenue homes that are across the street is definitely more ideal than WR4. Does it conserve the value of buildings? Generally downzoning may reduce property values, but however, protecting existing single-family homes and keeping a high-value neighborhood also is important for property values as well. And then we do feel it does encourage the most appropriate use of land in that area and reduces conflict with the surrounding residential neighborhood as things redevelop. And then looking at use patterns over time, and again, it's the historic uses in here have been single-family homes, so it does comply with that. So staff did recommend approval of this to the Whitefish Planning Board. They reviewed that on June 17th. 7 people and the applicant spoke in favor at in the public hearing, and then the planning board did unanimously vote for approval of this rezone. I'd be glad to try to answer any questions if you have any of me.
Any questions for Dave on his staff report?
Just a quick clarification. So one of your concerns, or one of the concerns, is that this new single-family zoning would buffer or would border commercial zoning, but we have buffering standards in place in our zoning regs. Is that correct? For when?
Well, like the WB3 zone has no setback requirement at all, so people can build right to the property line in the B3. There's no requirement in that zone to buffer.
But there's an alley in between.
Yeah, there is an alley in place between, so that is the buffer, is the alley.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Rebecca.
So Dave, if this passes through tonight, there's a 30-day waiting period?
Well, the city council, yeah, there'll be a second hearing where it'll go on the consent agenda at the next city council meeting, and then it would go into effect in 30 days hence if you were to vote for approval. 30 days after the second meeting of the city council.
And what is that 30-day delay for?
That is under state law. It allows for an appeal period, apparently.
Okay. And are there any current projects that could affect the outcome of this that might be coming forward?
I'm not aware of anything. There may be some building permits that have come in that area that, I don't see every building permit, so I'm not necessarily sure. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Dave from staff? We advertised for a public hearing on our ordinance 2108, I'd like to open up that public hearing now, and if there's an applicant representative here, give them the opportunity to speak first.
Hello, my name is Sarah Kneba, and I live at 336 Kalispell Avenue. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak before the City Council regarding the issue of rezoning Kalispell Avenue. I am one of the neighbors who's been organizing this effort to change the zoning on the west side of Kalispell Avenue from WR4 to WR2. And related to the issue at hand, I would like to extend a thank you to the city for the recently installed stop signs on our avenue and adjacent streets, which has helped to slow traffic to a speed that's reflective of our residential nature and neighborhood on Kalispell Avenue. Because the goal of the neighbors who submitted this petition is to maintain the residential character of Kalispell Avenue. More specifically, we're asking the city to bring the zoning on the west side of Kalispell Avenue in congruence with the recommendations in the 2007 growth policy. The current zoning of WR4 on Kalispell Avenue would allow density that's out of scale with the surrounding neighborhood and would create a disconnect by having different zoning densities on opposite sides of the street, which is why you are likely to hear from neighbors on both sides of the street who recognize how this density will affect each other's lives and property values. The staff reports identifies that there could be potential challenges with having single-family residences adjacent to commercial districts, and those of us who live on the west side of Kalispell Avenue have worked with our commercial neighbors to solve parking problems, snow removal, and other property maintenance over the years. We've gotten to know each other across the alleyway and have worked to maintain an environment that is respectful of the residences and the businesses. We believe that these relationships have led to compatible neighbors and should not be seen as a reason to allow high-density development on a residential street. All of us living in Whitefish have seen how quickly our small town is changing, but there are things that we can do to maintain the residential character of our neighborhoods. And changing the zoning in these 3 blocks of Kalispell Avenue at the request of the property owners is just one small step towards preserving the character of our neighborhood. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Any other member of the public wish to speak on this matter at this time? Please step forward. Patience is required when there's an order of go.
Hello. My name is Gail Pennicard-Munsky. My grandparents moved here in 1930, and my dad went to World War II and
Gail, could we have your address for the record, please?
I live at 518 Kalispell Avenue.
Thank you,
I
ma'am.
bought that place in 1977, I believe. And anyway, I have a huge, long history. I was born here in 1950. I've seen the growth. I've seen the changes in this town. And I'm telling you what, they don't impress me much, most of them. But I think one of the things that's so important to maintain some semblance of old Whitefish like it used to be, is to keep our neighborhoods safe from growth and overdevelopment. I mean, my neighbors across the street, if my place were to sell and they were to put condos or apartment houses or whatever, because I've got one of the biggest properties in my neighborhood, my poor neighbors across the street have to look at that, and they have to deal with all the congestion and the extra traffic and all that. We need to keep some part of Whitefish like it used to be. So I beg of you, change the zoning, for crying out loud, and keep some part of our city or our town like it used to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Anybody else wish to speak to council?
Hello? Michelle?
Yeah, just one moment, Colette. We'll get to you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Your go.
I'm a go, okay.
Your go.
I'm Mike Hauk. I live right across the street from Sarah at 323 Kalispell Avenue. And we need this zone change. All we're asking for is to move the zoning from the middle of Kalispell Avenue to the alley, 130 feet or whatever, just to keep the integrity of our neighborhood intact, which is very important with everybody. So I support this zoning change, and I hope that you guys do too. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Michelle, do we want to, come on, John. Yeah, we'll go with those present.
My name is John Lacey, 506 Kalispell Avenue. I would point the council to the considerable effort that goes into the body of the growth policy and the energy that goes into identifying what might come in that process, and the fact that this was identified as one of 2 specific locations in Whitefish that was ripe for exactly this kind of change, and that we move with this step to a broader, better growth policy for when that occurs later on, I think is an independent reason why this has value right now. Second, I would also point to the fact that yes, the current folks who have, for the most part, all signed this petition have grown, as Sarah aptly pointed out in her presentation today, to become equal neighbors with our commercial folks on the other side of the alley. And so to the extent that that is in the balance, I can assure you that a lot of those folks who have come to know the value of a single-family resident as opposed to an absent potential owner of a development or an entity that is there not necessarily to be lived in by that owner, there is great value in that. And so again, that supports maintaining this change to single-family residents. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Anybody else in our audience here wish to speak? John?
My name is John Ellis. I live at 630 Summers Avenue. I just want to address a question that Rebecca had about building permits. The planning board, I know, had a request for a single-family home with accessory apartment on one of the 300 lots. And so I believe we've already passed it, and it may have come to y'all. The Jost, I think, is the name of the family that sought it. And so that's the only building permit I'm aware of. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Please.
Thomas Brown, I live at 539 Kalispell Avenue, and I just want to highly support the change to WR2 that's proposed.
My name is Mary Drew Powers. I live at 327 Kalispell Avenue, and everybody has already made the salient points. I just want to say that I'm in support of this zone change. I think it'll be a good thing for the city.
Thanks, Mary.
My name's Shane McMillan. I live at 336 Kalispell Ave. And like everyone else, I speak in favor of changing the zoning from WR4 to WR2. Hopefully maintaining some semblance of authenticity and history in this town.
Great. Thank you, Shane.
Richard Hildner, 104 5th Street, Whitefish. And hopefully you've seen my letter in your packet that I sent. It was included with the planning board. But I'm just here in solidarity with the folks on Kalispell Avenue. I think they've gone to a considerable amount of effort and put in a lot of energy to do what is right, and I encourage your affirmative vote on the proposed zone change. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Anyone else here in the audience wish to speak on this matter? Michelle, do we have any online?
Colette, if you'd like to unmute your mic, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Deputy Mayor Sweeney and members of the council. I am owner of 534 Kalispell Avenue, and my parents bought that property in the early 1950s, and my siblings and I currently retain that property, and we strongly support the neighborhood and the people that are putting forth this initiative to try to maintain a semblance of historical Whitefish for the greater good of the community. And hearing about the hollowing out that is occurring, I think this is a step in the right direction to review past policies and to try to mitigate the problems that we are facing as a community. Thank you.
Thanks, Colette.
If there's anybody else participating by WebEx, if you'd like to please unmute your mic and state your name and address. I think we're good to go.
Good. With that, I will close the public hearing and turn the matter back to council for a motion and another discussion. Steve.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I make a motion that we adopt ordinance number 21-08, an ordinance rezoning approximately 3 acres of land located on Kalispell Avenue and East 6th Street from WR4 to WR2 and adopt the findings with respect to such rezoned WZC 21-01.
Are you making a motion to second that, Rebecca? Be nice if you need to do it verbally, it'd be great.
I would second, but I also should disclose I own property on Spokane Avenue. Do you think I should recuse?
I don't think you're involved in this at all.
Well, I like the neighborhood a lot.
It's great.
And I mean, I walk it out every day, multiple times, and I like all the neighbors, so I am a little biased towards them.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Motion's been made by Councilor Cornell and seconded by Councilor Norton.
I want to say a couple things towards
yes,
my
Steve,
motion. Thank
please.
you. First of all, I just want to say thanks to all the members of your neighborhood for coming together, and there were a couple letters in opposition, but I think we have a strong enough majority for sure to make this happen. I also want to say that it's kind of refreshing to see that some people are actively taking part in preserving what we consider the things that we like about Whitefish and why we're all here, because we hear a lot of chopping things up and building new stuff instead of saying, hey, we like it the way it is and we're willing to, to preserve that for our neighborhood. So that said, I just want to say thanks, and I obviously will be supporting this motion.
Any other comments? Andy?
I made the same comment, I think, the first night you were in, Sarah, and I want to commend you for taking the bull by the horns and organizing your neighbors. But my point was at that time is we often sit up here and we kind of get beat up a lot for people's zoning not matching what's on the ground in their neighborhood. And I really want people to understand that there's not really anything that we can do about that without neighborhood action. Neighbors have to get together, and we have to, as we were informed, have that majority of the property owners in that neighborhood that wants to be rezoned say, yes, we want to do this. Without that, our hands are tied. And so I just want to put that out there to anybody else in any other neighborhood that thinks that we've left them out to dry and something bad's going to happen in their neighborhood because of their existing zoning that doesn't exist there today, that this is a good example of, hey, it works. If you get your neighborhood together, we can make things change. We haven't had a vote yet, but I can kind of look down here and pretty much assume what the outcome's going to be. So again, thanks to the neighborhood, and thank you, Sarah, very much. So.
Any other comments from council on this matter? Rebecca?
Just like to clarify, was there a cost to do this, Dave, to the neighborhood?
None.
Well, there wasn't any because the city council voted to waive their fees.
That's what I thought, but then I thought it got revisited, so I just wanted to make sure. Okay. If another neighborhood were to come forward, would there be fees?
That would be up to you guys in general. If it's a private party applying, then they should pay the fee that covers it. Otherwise, the taxpayers are paying for it. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to take a little bit of a personal privilege here. One of the things that brought me to this council was a neighborhood, in the neighborhood that I live in, coming together to fight a land use change for our neighborhood. It gave me great faith in democracy and the power of a neighborhood and citizens to affect changes and prevent changes, quite frankly, in their area. So your neighborhood has renewed some of those old emotions that occurred to me at that time, and how proud I am of you for bringing this forward and organizing. And as Andy said, this makes our job really fun and quite easy, I might add. So thank you very much to all of you who supported this and have come in. So thanks so much. With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed, like sign. Motion passes unanimously. Good luck to you all. Thanks. All right. I'll look to council. We're at 9 o'clock. Does anybody want to take a short break, or we plow on? Carry on? All right, let's do this. Next, we have communications from our Planning and Building Director. Consideration of a request from Lee Rosenthal for Whitefish Lakeshore variance to construct a dock to exceed the allowable construction area located at 2704 Plaza Road.
That's going to be me instead of Dave.
Good.
Yep.
Thanks.
All right, so we'll try and make this one quick since we're getting late. This application is from Cliff Hayden on behalf of his client Lee Rosenthal for a minor dock variance at 2704 Plaza Road. The property has 100 feet of lake frontage, which allows them 800 square feet of constructed area in the Lakeshore Protection Zone. However, the property has a number of grandfathered structures in the LPZ, including a portion of their house and its deck, and then also a pretty large boathouse with its deck and stairs. So 2704, just for any of you that don't know where it is, it's just north of Les Mason, so it's over in the county. You've probably seen this boathouse. It's in pretty good shape. It looks pretty nice, but it's kind of sitting pretty much right on the mean high annual water mark, so pretty close to the water. They had originally applied for a larger F-shaped dock as a part of this variance, but after getting some feedback from the staff and also the Lakeshore Committee, the applicant resubmitted for a smaller I-shaped dock that's 42 feet in length and 236 square feet total. Based on staff research of similar past permits, the Lakeshore Committee's recommendation to City Council was for approval of a simple I-shaped dock that was no larger than 240 square feet and 30 feet in length. However, they also discussed that the 30 feet may be exceeded if the applicant submitted a water depth profile showing the water was less than 4 feet at the end, which that's what we use for allowing a dock to exceed our common 60-foot standard. Since the Lakeshore meeting, the applicant submitted the water depth profile to extend the dock to 42 feet, but the request remains within the 240 square foot maximum recommended area by the Lakeshore Committee, and so that's consistent with their recommendations. For minor Lakeshore variances, we usually look at 3 standard considerations. First, is there a hardship, which I would say could definitely be argued either way, but also people own Lakeshore properties so that they can have a dock and enjoy the lake. So obviously it wouldn't be ideal if they couldn't have some sort of a dock on the property there. Second, we look at if reasonable alternatives exist. In this situation, the applicant has a couple of options. First, tear down some of the grandfathered structures so they have increased allowable area for the dock. This is located within the county, so it's a little bit goofy because they deal with what's on land and we only deal with what's below the low water mark. And therefore that triggers what they have for allowable constructed area within our regulations, even though the county allows for slightly higher onshore there. Second option would be see if the neighbors would consider a shared dock. They did have one with the neighboring property way back in 2000. We're not sure when that was actually taken out. The current owner just bought, and in 2020, the neighboring property that they had previously owned a shared dock with actually replaced theirs for a private dock. So not really a great option right now since they just put in a private dock next door. And then the last option would just be opt to not put in a dock. Obviously not ideal for the property owner. Another thing to note is just that since it's located in the county, they obviously do have slightly higher constructible area allowance. That's just something that I would keep in kind of consideration as you're making this decision. And then finally, the third criteria we look for is that the project won't have any adverse impacts on the lake, which definitely isn't likely, given that the dock will be well under the allowable dock size for all the neighbors, which would be 60 feet unless they submit a water depth profile, bringing it up to 100 feet in length. There was no public comment at the Lakeshore Committee meeting, and while they recommended denial of the original larger F-shaped dock that they were asking for, they also took a second vote to recommend approval of a simpler I-shaped dock for which the applicant's resubmittal was based on. With that, after review of the updated application, the staff recommendations for approval of the dock variance and permit, again, that's given that the dock remains within that 240 square feet. That was the Lakeshore recommendations for that condition of approval. So, yep, there's 11 updated conditions in your packets, and our recommendation would be for approval of those.
Thanks, Tara. Any questions for Tara on this?
One quick question, Tara. So if I read all this correctly, they're currently at about 852 feet, and they've got 800 feet maximum, and if they get 240 feet more of dock, they're going to be roughly 1,100 feet?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Which puts them 340 over. So the variance is basically 340 square feet?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tara. This is not advertised for a public hearing, so I'm going to turn this directly to council for any other questions or motion.
I would make a motion then.
Thank you.
I would move to approve WLV 21-W38. And subject to, how many conditions did we have there, Tara? I forgot.
11.
Subject to the 11 conditions. I lost my place there.
I'll second.
Motion by Councilor Fury, seconded by Councilor Davis. Any further discussion on the motion? Andy?
I typically don't like to see more constructed in the Lakeshore Protection Zone than is allowed by the code, but given the fact this property is in the county and they've got a lot of grandfathered stuff in there and it's a little hard, and I do understand getting depth for dock is important for people, and so really based on that, that's kind of the only reason I vote for it, but other than that, it's against my better judgment, so.
Any other comment this evening? All right, call the question. All those in favor, raise your hand. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Matter passes unanimously, Michelle. Next, on to communications from our fire chief.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and Councilors. If you haven't noticed, it's hot and dry. Last week, Flathead County and the DNRC put in stage 1 fire restrictions, and I placed that order Also putting the city in stage 1 fire restrictions. My order per ordinance 17-25 stays in place until the next council meeting tonight. I'd like you to continue our stage 1 fire restrictions till further notice, and probably prior to your next meeting, I'll be looking at stage 2. We are having emails today with the other fire chiefs and Flathead County commissioners discussing going into stage 2, probably later next week.
Thanks,
So,
Joe.
yeah.
Any questions for Joe? Joe, Rebecca, go ahead.
I know the city has a way to sign up for notifications for emergencies, and is that on our website then? Okay, so if we have to evacuate because of wildfires, is that how the public would be instructed, Joe?
Yeah, and I'm working on something on evacuations to get the information out. Until we know the incident, which way the wind's blowing, what we're evacuating from, we can't tell you right now which way you're going to go. Or
Right.
maybe we want you to shelter in place. So
okay.
we have to work on a lot of those ways to get the message out properly. And we're working with the police department. I sent some stuff down to Bridger just last week about different ways to notify people. The biggest thing we have, other than face-to-face, word of mouth, is to use the Code Red, which is very similar to the Amber Alert system, which is done through the Flathead County Office of Emergency Management. So they'd be able to ping cell phones. All the people that turned off their Amber Alerts because they think it bothers them, they're going to have to follow the crowd.
Okay, and then just practically, we should have hoses ready at our residences in case we have to
Yeah,
water things down and.
I am not that concerned with an immediate evacuation due to wildland fire. With a lot of people in the area, most of our fires are created by people, so there are people around that know about them. So our goal is a fast response to keep the fire to a small area without a name. My big concern for here would be a fire, a lightning strike into a remote area that we couldn't get to very fast. At that point, we would have plenty of warning to tell people of a wildland fire.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the chief? Joe, what is the impediment to your going to stage 2 today?
I'd like to make sure that we stay together with the county and the DNRC to really cut down on the confusion, especially with tourists coming to town, let alone the regular people. So I think if we all do it together.
Well, I'm good with that. My question, it's a rhetorical question. If everybody thinks we're going there next week, why aren't we there now?
I started the email chain this morning with the other chiefs saying, I think we should go right now. And I'm surprised so far, there's 17 different fire chiefs in the valley. So far, we're all in agreement. So now we're just waiting for the county commissioners and the DNRC.
Okay, thank you. All right. I would entertain a motion from council.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I'll make a motion. I would move to approve ordinance number 21-09, emergency ordinance placing a stage 1 fire restriction within city limits, providing an exception and waiving the second reading with an immediate effective date, and this would be the only reading.
Motion's made and seconded. Anybody wish to speak to the motion? All those in favor? All those those opposed, like sign. Motion passes unanimously. Thanks, Joe, and keep us apprised. Thanks. Next up, communications from our city manager, Dana.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have just 2 updates. The first one is I think it's just a good time to remind individuals that the COVID-19 pandemic, while we've seen, lightened restrictions, our cases are going up in the valley. Currently, Flathead County is at 137 active cases. We are the highest in the state of Montana. Of course, we are also lower in vaccination rates, so hopefully individuals do consider getting a vaccine, as that's proven now, I think, across the United States to be one of the more effective ways of lowering transmission. From that, we cannot put in a mask ordinance should it get bad. The state has removed our ability to do so. So if in the fall numbers do continue to rise, we will be able to do recommendations only. So I think it is very prudent that everyone take that into consideration as we continue moving through this summer with the large amount of visitors that we have here and gatherings going on, that we need to just be aware that the pandemic really isn't over with the new variants out there. I'm going to turn it over to Craig because I want him to give you guys an update on Edgewood and that project delay. So Craig, you got the floor.
Floor is mine. So I'm not sure how many of you guys saw the alert that we did put out on our city alert system. We were notified towards the end of last week from the contractor, White Civil Construction, who has been awarded the Edgewood reconstruction project, that he is unable to, was that me? The mic doesn't like this news either. Unable to get pipe for the Edgewood reconstruction project. We have, in round numbers, about a mile of pipe that needs to be buried on this project. There's roughly 2,000 feet of water main and about 3,300 feet of storm sewer. And when we awarded the project back in early June, all indications were that the water main was going to be about 6 weeks out and the storm sewer would be less than a month out. Well, here we are, about 6 weeks after that, and we don't have a delivery date for either. And there really isn't any work we can do on that project but for tree removal without having the pipe. So at this point, we have issued a stop work order. We're monitoring progress, but the roadway has been reopened, and I think you can expect it to be that way for the foreseeable future. So I'll continue to work with RPA, the engineer, WCC, the contractor, and try and get this project back on its feet. But right now, there's definitely a pipe shortage throughout the country, and we're seeing that. So that's the update.
Craig, when you say, is this an indefinite stoppage? Is this a month stoppage? Do we have any sense of it at all? Are we talking about pushing this back to next spring?
Yeah, so there's a variety of variables on this project, one of which is the high groundwater that we see in the spring. And so our goal would be, at an absolute minimum, would be to get the underground construction completed this year so that we can let the groundwater come up and go back down and then rebuild the roadway towards the end of the spring or early summer next year. But we just don't have any definite dates on pipe delivery. And so so right now it is an indefinite stoppage. We did that the middle of last week, and all we can do is continue to push the the pipe delivery as much as we can. But I think we're in a similar situation as lots of other municipalities around the country trying to get material. And it's not just pipe. I mean, it's all the valves, it's all of the stormwater fittings. We can't get paint right now to complete our annual road marking program. I mean, it just, everywhere you look, it's not just labor, it's materials. So we're kind of struggling. But yeah, I guess short answer is it's an indefinite stoppage, but we will continue to keep you updated and push as hard as we can to come up with a revised schedule for the project.
What is the impact going to be, if any, on budget?
At this point, no effect on budget. The project was awarded at the low bid price, and the contractor does need to keep that. There is a bid bond in place. If it goes, I don't know exactly what the contract reads, but if it goes beyond, I believe, a year, they have a chance to renegotiate. But in working with the contractor over the last couple of weeks, I don't anticipate any impacts to the budget.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Craig?
Are they obligated to finish the project as soon as they are able to do so? And do they have other conflicts or something that would prevent that if this project gets delayed by several months?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely their obligation to build it as soon as they can get the materials. If the project goes into force majeure, you know, where they literally can't get it and they come to us with a claim, then we'll have a whole nother, you know, situation. But at this point, it really just appears to be a delay in delivery. And so we haven't heard any, you know, inkling from the contractor that, that they'll be coming to us with any claims.
Any other questions for Craig or for Dana on her staff report? Rebecca?
Would you mind just mentioning, you wrote that you had met with Senator Tester, and you discussed, I talked to Frank about that, and the mayor and the deputy mayor and our city manager all met with Senator Tester, and they talked about housing assistance possibly. So I just was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So we were able to meet with Senator Tester, and he's, you know, right on top of all the issues that we're facing here in our community, from housing to infrastructure. And, you know, I think it was a really good discussion. We talked about how the LIHTC project works. One of the issues you see, you know, Summit Housing has been in discussions with us. They would love to do a project here with housing tax credits. One of the challenges, though, is that those programs don't consider the cost of the land. Well, when you're in a community like ours, and quite honestly the entire valley at this point, the cost of land is becoming prohibitive to allowing for affordable housing developments that are not high density. And I mean, you know, pretty significant density that they're looking at to make it pencil and Whitefish. So, you know, just one of those topics was, you know, how do we help support those projects that we have the benefits of housing tax credits, but land is the problem. Whether it's through grants or taking a look at that housing tax credit program and considering how resort communities are negatively impacted when we probably have still a higher demand for the service worker jobs, that we need that housing just as much as Kalispell and Columbia Falls do. We talked about infrastructure, so, you know, we talked about the American Rescue Plan funds that were identified for water and sewer projects. Of course, we're looking at using that for affordable housing. But, you know, I made a comment that streets are left out of it. And of course, there's a reason for that, because as we all know, if you haven't heard, there is an infrastructure bill for streets that hopefully will be coming out of the federal legislature and making that way to cities, because we can always use funding for our streets. As we see our population increase, we're seeing that wear and tear on our streets as well. So I think, you know, it was a great meeting. Frank can share his comments too if he has any about it, but I think it was a great opportunity to share with Senator Tester the challenges that Whitefish is facing right now, and just to make sure that he's aware of ways that he could help at the federal level. One of the interesting ideas, and we'll get back to this when it comes to short-term rentals, but in Hawaii, for example, second homeowners are taxed at a higher rate. In Montana, you can't, but we can't tax a short-term rental at a higher rate. But the state legislature could allow us to do something like that. And so again, it's one of those things where the state could help with the second home ownership. You know, and Senator Tester did bring that up, and we discussed that for a short while. So that's kind of my update on that meeting.
Great. Any other questions for Dana on her staff report?
I do have one, if that's okay.
Great.
Dana and Chief Page and Chief Dial, how did things go this weekend with such a significant event right outside of our doorstep?
Well, we've survived. We're all here. From my understanding, I'll let Chief Dial and Joe share their comments, but I can tell you I sat in a 2-hour traffic line trying to go to that concert. The county is dealing with complaints about it, so I'm not sure how that will proceed in the future. But you know, it's an event that They've increased the numbers of tickets sold from the first year. First year was, I think, around 13,000. This year, upwards of 20,000. To be honest, there was probably 30,000 people there when you add all the vendors and everything. There was a lot of people. So I'll turn it over to them since the bigger impact was what happened maybe after the event. I was notified and realized that the event organizers sent traffic down Columbia Avenue as the means to get down JP Road to get to the event. I think that's something we'll at least discuss with them. You know, why use our residential streets? Is there a better alternative? But they faced issues on Edgewood and Dillon Road and JP Road. I think for parking was a big issue for them since I was there. I can tell you it was a problem. But Chief Dell, you got some updates?
You know, for the most part, the crowd was pretty well behaved. One thing we were not prepared for was the large after party they had on Friday night, especially at the Remington. People started lining up at about 8 o'clock for a midnight show. And by the time we were dealing with traffic coming into town, by the time we got downtown and realized that probably 75% of them had open containers. So at that point, we felt that it was just best to monitor it rather than wade into the crowd and cause a small riot. The next night, we made sure we got down on foot, and as soon as we saw it, we addressed it. And we only had one arrest. One of our officers was slightly injured. Individual was urinating in a parking garage. He confronted him. They got into a fight, and luckily the good guys won. The guy's still sitting in jail right now for felony assault on a police officer. We had one other DUI, but I mean, for the most part, it went well. Dana and I did talk. The last time we had this event, it put a significant drain on our resources, both people and our budget. And we're hoping that next time that the promoters will try to ante up to help the police department. And, you know, I know Parks had to come in and empty garbage. That was another big thing too. I mean, there was so much garbage. And, you know, they came in and emptied it. And by the time Saturday night came around, it was stuffed again. So a lot of planning to go on. But I think with the money that this is making, I think that's probably something that the council and city manager ought to approach the promoters and just let them know how much it does strain our resources and impacts our budget. But all in all, I thought it went well for the amount of people. The other thing, you probably noticed it too, you couldn't get on your cell phones, could you? All of our mobile data terminals in our car are are cell phone based, and we couldn't get out on our mobile data terminals either. So it was quite a challenge for the entire city. But like I said, other than a couple of bad actors, it went as well as can be expected.
We had a little different take because that's actually in our fire and ambulance response area. So we manned the event. I was there for 2.5 days, long days. They definitely oversold. It was much different than 2 years ago. Friday night wasn't too bad, but Saturday and Sunday was amazing how thick that crowd was down there. We also suffered the problem with the cell phones, and I wasn't thinking ahead of time, but the fire department, we use what's called FirstNet, and FirstNet will set up a remote satellite connection for cell phones that are on FirstNet, and we can get the police on that too, so that during a major event, we would still have priority coverage, which would have been helpful. Most of our injuries were minor. When you get out to the people that just finished paying all that money to be there, they do not want to go to the hospital. They don't you dare take me. The other place we had was the rodeo. Cowboys never want to go in the ambulance. And so it wasn't until about 10:30 on Sunday night that we had 3 transports and things. And the event does pay us at our rates that we charge for wildland, which is set by the state and the feds for equipment and our manpower. So we were reimbursed for our forces that are on site.
nobody else got a question, I've got one. Query, and this really goes to the significant problems, two things. Who, if anyone, can require of the organizers of an event such as this to ensure that the public infrastructure is, for lack of a better description, appropriately sized and prepared? I'm thinking of the cell towers and the cell, because today, in today's world, there are many people in that area that if there was an emergency, guess what? They don't have a landline. All they've got is a cell phone. And if it's not working, we got a problem. And is there anything we can do to require either of the county or the organizers to appropriately assist in staffing that facility or that area with police officers to ensure that we don't have the traffic problems and other problems? Are there anything that we can do, Dana, or Angie, or Bill, that you know of that we can, so we don't have this problem next time?
So I think and I've already I met with the new county administrator today, Pete Melnick, and so he knows that I was displeased with a lot of the situation that occurred. There again, like I said, hearing from residents, I think it would be very important that we'll write a letter to the county commissioners and the council could maybe sign off on that at the next meeting, letting them know that these are the issues we faced, and if they have a special event permit that they are issuing, they should consider the impacts on our community. One of the challenges is this is an event outside of Whitefish, and they are using Whitefish as the destination. So again, we'll need to sit down with the event organizers. They've obviously worked with our fire department to be there. We obviously would have to respond if called there anyways, likely. So I think we can look at how to ensure a better event. I can only imagine that the event organizers have identified some improvements. I'm curious what MDT's thoughts are, because I believe Highway 40 got backed up as well, quite significantly. So I think if all the jurisdictions came forward and told the county, like, here's what you need to do, it's a fine line between, because the county is all about, use your property, whatever you want, but when you have this many people drawn into one location, I do know, like, at 5:30, I'll give you an example. 2 hours down Dillon Road from Highway 40, it took me to get there. Midway through, I guess an hour in at 5:30, they put out a message on Facebook that everybody should use Edgewood now instead of Dillon Road. I believe that caused issues on Edgewood and their VIP section. So they have a lot of learning curve to have increased the number of tickets. I think you're going to see a lot of people not want to go back because of just the number of people. So hopefully that they have some plans in place to mitigate all of these issues. Parking being probably the biggest complaint we heard, besides lack of water for people actually in attendance. But the cell towers is interesting. There was no service near the event. There was no service, obviously, in town. They should be required to bring in a cell tower and work with Verizon and AT&T to accommodate the 20,000 people in that one location. 20,000 people is like Columbia Falls and Whitefish combined on a normal day without the tourism. So that's a lot of people in one location.
Yeah, no, Bill, yes?
Yeah, one other thing I wanted to add, there were some comments about camping. We had a zero tolerance on that. We moved people when we saw campers. We can't be every place everywhere, but I know we wrote several tickets for illegal camping in town. People can park their camper vans on the street and go to the concert and come back and go elsewhere. There's nothing about that. And people, I think some people just overreacted and thought because their camper vans were parked there that they were camping, but we were being very strict on that. And like I said, I've always said this, you're never going to hear us say that we're doing the best we can. We used all the resources we have, and if we could add more resources, we could use, seriously, I talked with Bridger this morning and my sergeants, we could use 50 cops. I mean, it was that.
That's my point. That's my point.
Yep.
And we can't support, this community can't support that. And the people that are doing this need to sign up for finding that kind of help for us and for themselves. Dana, I understand it was a very successful event, and by all accounts, the organizer, I think, is open to discussion and probably would appreciate it. I'm not sure where it'll go, but I think we need to be keeping those channels open, because I suspect that we're going to see this again this time next year. Hopefully our other infrastructure, our grocery stores and things like that, will be in a better position to be prepared for to support not only that, but the locals who were looking for food on Saturday and Sunday and found none on the shelves.
Yeah, that's a challenge not only from the event perspective, but I think what we're also seeing is businesses have no workers to stock shelves midday. So they might have had food in the back that they just couldn't bring out, because I think you're seeing that with water bottles constantly throughout summer, is if they don't go and restock water bottles midday on a Friday before everybody's camping, you're seeing that too. So yeah, it was a challenging year. I think the event needed more people as well for the parking directions. And again, I think it has to do with staffing. From their perspective, I'm not sure, but yeah. We'll sit down with the event organizer, and if I still think it'd be good to communicate with the county commissioners if they do have a special event permit process, to at least identify the issues that we have seen, and the support that we need. They didn't have very many officers at the event for how many people were there, I'll tell you. It was like maybe 10. I mean, at a time, you didn't see very many of them. Right. So people were on their best behavior, though.
Good.
So, yeah.
That's great.
At least as much as they could be with the alcohol and sunshine. It would be great if the event organizer could do this in the fall when we aren't at peak tourism season, but I understand that might not be ideal for their venue. So.
Great. Thank you. With that, we'll turn or go to councilor comments. We have a couple of letters, and so with that, I'll start with you, Rebecca. Any councilor comments or things you'd like to talk about?
There's kind of a list because we got so much public input today. We'll start with Richard Hildner. So, is it possible to paint the handicap parking spots on all that, Craig? And straighten the 2-hour time limit signs that have been backed into?
Yeah, we can easily straighten the signs. I did let Joey know that as soon as we had blue paint, she would be first on our list.
Okay. And then Chief
I think
Dial.
also red paint for the fire zone, but
Oh yeah, the fire zone too.
we're aware of it.
And then Chief Dial, is it possible to have a police officer stay longer than just?
Well, I hate to tell Richard he's wrong, but he's wrong. We assign 2 police officers down there for every event. And I think if you check with Rhonda, you'll find out that's true. I will make sure, so once the barriers get set up, they do not leave unless there is some emergency that the other patrol officers need assistance. I will make sure in the future we check the library parking lot. I, on several occasions, Richard, have written tickets to people for parking in the fire zone in front of the library, and we will continue to do that. Remember, our resources are limited, and on Tuesday nights, I always stay over, Bridger stays over, and we always have 2 people assigned to that, and we pay overtime for that. So that's our solution with that.
What about giving Joey the orange tickets to put on cars and be a pest?
I don't think that's a wise idea.
Doesn't really seem like her personality to me, but yeah. Okay, Richard, you could maybe start that. Okay.
I bet Gretchen would love to do it.
Okay, so then the next thing is Mark asking about the wastewater treatment plant having a public tour. Are we planning that at any time?
Yeah, so when Mark and I talked about this last year, we hadn't begun construction of the new plant, and what I had offered was a tour of the existing plant to show him all the things that we were doing to try and mitigate odors. There will be tours available of the new plant, but probably not until next year. We've got a lot of work to do to finish the plant and to get it up and running and to make sure we're meeting permits. But plant tours will be available for those who are interested, likely in 2022.
And were you aware that the plant is smelling again?
Yeah, Dana, why don't you
I'll give you
take
an
that
update
one?
on that.
Okay.
It is smelling. There is no doubt. And something did change, actually, I think, and Mark might not be aware of this, but they had to remove some blowers to install other equipment, which has caused a noticeable increase in the smell during July in the first pond. So I met with a couple individuals from Shady River Lane area with Neil, and he's our assistant public works director for those in the audience, and he is really managing the project out there and the operations specifically in this transition period. And we intend to actually draft a letter and send it out to the neighboring residents, just reminding them that, you know, during this transition period, the odors that are coming from the sewage, the treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant, you know, could be intense at times. We are trying to mitigate it. We are actually, did we start flow through? Because I think, no, not yet. We're hopefully going to start moving flow through the new plant soon. As we do that, there could be periods where odors are stronger as we dewater one of the lagoons. The first lagoon is pretty heavily filled with solids and probably should have been dredged maybe 10 years ago, but we knew we were coming on with this plant. And when we pulled the blowers out, that pond's struggling to keep up right now. So we are on our way to solving hopefully most of the odor issues. Obviously, in the early mornings and evenings, as the air temperatures change, the odors flip down into the riverbed area, and so the smells are stronger. And it's unfortunate because I know everybody there who doesn't have AC has probably this summer tried to open their windows in the cool evenings to offset that heat. We're working on communication though, so we'll be providing updates to a couple of the residents kind of on a monthly basis, but making sure our communication is better with residents in the area. We have not heard from Lake Trailview, who is right nearby, so it definitely has a kind of a directional way that it goes based on wind, you know, so it changes when it can be.
Who is the contact person that you would like them to contact?
So Neil Desort offered his contact information to both Chris and Kelly, who live out there. So Mark, I would assume, could also contact him, or Craig. Either of them should be available.
All right. Thank you for the update. It's disappointing, but, you know, we're working on it. And, okay, the next one is Toby wrote a letter, Toby Scott, about public-private partnerships to identify properties. And we have a pretty extensive housing situation. I mean, our committee's already in place, but is there anything that we should be doing on that one? Since he's come before us twice now.
Sure. I guess from a housing perspective, there is, obviously, we've been approached by Summit Housing out of Missoula to do a project here. They're looking for land. Based on the letter, it sounds like there's businesses interested in doing something, and again, the biggest issue is finding that land. I think that we're gonna have to, it's no doubt gonna have to be employers who work together, or, you know, maybe it's a public-private partnership to make it work. The challenges I see with that is that when a business is invested in it and they want to do the housing, they want that identified for their employees only. And so there are, obviously, I mean, it still increases our housing stock, but when it comes to tax credits, that won't work for those type of developers. It would have to be a private developer who's willing to work with a business to say these housing units are just for your employees, because often you see that. Now that might not be the case, but we could look at doing a housing, I've been kind of throwing around the idea of a housing workshop with larger employers, bring them in, maybe smaller ones that are interested, some of the counselors, the chamber, housing authority, exactly as he listed, maybe not a committee, but a workshop to kind of
That'd be a good idea.
Listen to the needs, because I think, you know, as we work on this needs assessment, it's going to be really important this fall as we do the needs assessment to see what the needs are. And we might be at the point now where we're looking at 60% AMI needs more than we are that 80 to 120% AMI. I'm not sure. Are we looking for rentals? Are we looking for modest single-family homes or not? So that's also an important part that we're working on, but whatever the council wants to decide here, if you guys want to get a work group together, or a committee, set up a committee.
I can weigh in a little bit on this. I've been talking with a couple of the business owners and Toby, and they're getting more and more organized. They, like you said, they're willing to do whatever it takes. They're thinking obviously about their own employees, but they're thinking more about workforce housing than legacy homes. They need places for people to work, and that's why we have shutdowns. It's affecting, their incomes. They're ready to do something. I was talking with Ed Doctor before the meeting tonight. He's gonna try to put together some sort of meeting next week and invite all the counselors, and I would assume staff members as well, to try to just at least get the discussion started. We do have land that we're not doing anything with currently, and that's the snow lot, and we haven't had an update on that in quite a while.
That's definitely moving forward, though. So that is one that we can give an update on. I'll have them come and give an update, but they are moving forward with that project.
Okay. So anyway, just everyone on council should be getting an email sometime about a meeting, potentially as early as next week, to just, I don't think they understand what the city can and can't do, and they need to hear that from the people that know. But they definitely want to work with us and potentially work with Columbia Falls and Kalispell to do something together, because it affects all of us, and it's not just a Whitefish issue anymore.
Yeah, Kalispell, I think, has 500 units in the hopper. I mean, they're going to have a lot of apartment rentals coming down the line. I talked to Doug, and they've approved somewhere upwards of 500 units. So it's just waiting for them to be built at this point. I'm happy to attend any meeting. Just keep in mind, if we do get a quorum of the council, we have to notice that as a public meeting. So if it might be easier with the initial meeting to have them identify a couple counselors that want to attend. But if not, we can notice it that there would be a quorum.
I'll pass that on. Yeah. Thanks.
Any other comments, Rebecca?
Well, I just wanted to bring up David Martin's noise ordinance. That's the second time David Martin has come by with a noise ordinance. So I was gonna ask if we could do the police need to get a dB meter and begin to keep a record? You guys don't have anything like that, do you, Chief Dial? Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you, yeah.
I said, do you need to get one of those meters? So if you get a noise complaint, you can record the amount, the volume?
I talked to the buildings chief, it doesn't work. And it's too subjective. Here's if we're gonna talk about that, if your people are going to complain about outdoor music, ban it all. Because that puts too much of the onus on us. The officer has to make that decision. So that would be my recommendation. If people are going to continue to complain about outdoor music, ban it, and that would solve a lot of it. But
It doesn't
I don't
sound
know
as
how well
fun,
that's going to
though.
go over.
Okay, maybe we could just put this on hold and bring it back another day to talk about. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up is the North Valley Food Bank and Farmhands requesting money for the food production facility, cold storage, and possibly a greenhouse. And you're going to be submitting another formal request, but I'm just wanting to acknowledge that you came here and you're still sitting there, and that you're prepared to present something. And I really appreciate the work given the high volumes that we increased to last year. So I don't know how to go forward with that proposal.
Well, so the request was to use the American Rescue Plan dollars that we've received half of them. We'll receive the other half next year. We'll be receiving a full, about $2.1 million. The last kind of general direction we received from council was to try to focus that on affordable housing as much as possible. We will come up with more of that formalized plan here soon. One of the things that, you know, we'll come back to a work session where we could definitely discuss this as part of it. A center like that sounds like it would be a pretty significant investment and might take most or all of the funds. I'm not quite sure what the investment request is there on the city's standpoint. So I think more information is definitely needed, but to also consider there's competing interests with those funds for affordable housing as well. So
I think I spoke with Gretchen briefly before the meeting, and she was just wondering, she wanted to get our take as whether this is something that we would support so that they could go through and say, okay, this is how much we can come up with, this is how much we would expect from the city. Before they do all that work, she wanted to see if this was a good enough idea. Am I capturing what you were asking me earlier? Okay. So I think that's kind of what they're asking for at this point, is this something that we're willing to commit some of that money to, and then eventually we'll see a number. But they don't want to go through that work if we're going to take it all and put it towards affordable housing.
I guess I'm, on a personal level, I like your idea, I truly do. On a weighted scale of things that are important to this city and to its community, if I've got dollars left over and they can be usefully used for affordable housing, my view is I think that's where this council would likely go. I do think your ideas are important. I just think on the gravity of where we are and what's needed in this city, to the extent we have dollars that we have some discretion on, that's probably where we'll tend to go with it, is my guess. But we will keep your request in mind as we evaluate what we have in the way of funds, as well as in the way of opportunities. And so I do truly appreciate your bringing this forward to us and to bring it to, because if you had not, we wouldn't even be able to throw it into the hopper. So thank you so much. And any further inquiries or any further information as to what you're really talking about would be great if you could provide that to Dana, so we had something concrete to work with. And I don't want to send you on a circle going no place, but I think that's where we kind of are. Anybody disagree or agree?
I agree with you, Frank. The issue of affordability is multi-level. It's not just where can you live. I mean, if you can find a place to live, you also have to eat.
Right.
And I did a lot of volunteering at the food bank early on last year, and it was busy over there. Mm-hmm. And you know, if you ever want to know how the other half lives, volunteer at the food bank on pickup nights. You meet some really nice people that are really in dire straits. So having a way, this is something that I would support if we had a bunch of extra money. At this point, we are kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place with losing our ability to require affordable housing in the city. This would, as Frank said, kind of be down a few rungs. But I would support it if there were if we had a better idea of what it might be. It could also be something we work towards in the future, in future budgets as well.
Ben?
Yeah, just on that topic while we're on it, I think that I like your proposal. I think that you're the logical group to spearhead something like this. And there's going to be a lot of competing needs for these funds, and housing is probably going to be at the top of that list. There always is competing needs. But looking at what you're trying to achieve, you may not be able to get all the funds you need out of ARPA anyway. And so part of me thinks, I think you'd find a lot of support in the community for something like this. And my thought would be develop your plans, get an actual plan together, and then start dialing for dollars. And I think one place you should be calling is here, but I also think there's some really good philanthropy in town that can maybe help. And I know I'd be supportive of it in some way, shape, or form. And I think it sounds like a really good idea. So I hope that you don't quit. Thank you.
Ben, any additional comments this evening?
I do. I'm going to use the balance of my time here to share some thoughts on short-term rentals. I know it's late, but I do want to wrap up that conversation in my head anyway. So for me, the short-term rental issue, in my opinion, can't be understated. I mean, if you look at the numbers of how the short-term rental economy is growing in terms of the number of units, the dollars involved, it's huge, and it's having, in my opinion, a very significant impact on the landscape of the town. It's what allows for all this visitation to even happen. And so the problem is, I don't have anything morally opposed to short-term rentals, but it's the collateral impacts on the community is where it really rubs me. I think there's a whole economy of short-term rentals. There's a lot of people making a lot of money from it, developers and property owners and things like that. And I think that there are a lot of people in the community that are getting impacted by it in the form of high housing prices, traffic, and other issues as evidenced in the Sustainable Tourism Management Plan. And so I look at this map and I say, thank God we have zoning where it's confined to where it is. I know a lot of the other towns don't have that. It's spread all over the entire town, and then we'd really be in trouble. But I think it's important that we keep it where it is, and that we have to have a boundary between short-term rental and where people in our community can afford to be. So in that vein, I would speak in support of the recommendations that have been made about the 90-day rental. I know there are concerns about, I don't want to call it transient workers, but folks who are working here on an extremely short-term basis. But I'll be honest, the biggest problem to me is the fact that we have businesses that cannot even operate because they don't have employees. And this is not going to solve the problem, but if this contributes a couple extra units, at least, of housing back into our long-term stock, I think it's worth doing. And I know there's some legal concerns, but I honestly think that Whitefish has more to lose in the battle against short-term rentals than almost anywhere else in Montana, and I think we should be on the forefront of how we're addressing this problem, and that it would behoove us to do the best we can to try to craft it in a way that will stand legal scrutiny and gets the job done. And I think the policy goals are important, and the legalities are important too, but I think let's try to find a way to meet our policy goals, if we can, would be what I would support. Related to that, I think one of the other suggestions that I really like is the license number being required to be in the listing itself. I feel like that would be a very beneficial enforcement tool. I know if I was going and looking at listings and trying to see if there was some that weren't legal, the very first thing I would do is find the ones that don't have the number in it. And if we have subsequent conversations about how to further our enforcement of short-term rentals, I think having that rule on the books is going to do nothing but help us. I know I went on a vacation to Hawaii recently, and every single short-term rental there, we had the license number and the listing along with the certificate, and that was one of the requirements, and I think it should be here too. And my last point on this is, in a broader sense, again, circling back to the rental and tourism economy, and the fact that I do think that some of the residents here are getting the short end of the stick here. Housing has to get paid for somehow. And I know part of me hopes we are not missing an opportunity by not including this in the resort tax, but I feel like the affordable housing initiatives that we need to be doing are going to require capital, and I think that somehow that economy of rentals needs to help contribute to that. And I don't know the best way to do it. If it's, I was thinking, gosh, is there a way to have, license fees or something that can help, fund housing projects, or, some sort of taxing structure against the resort residential zones, or I don't really know what the answer is, but I do know that the people in the town are very concerned about where it's going. I'm very concerned about where it's going, and I think that this is a major piece of the puzzle, and I think that if there was a way to help find a way for that economy to help fund at least part of the solution here in town, then it should. And so I would love any ideas in that regard.
Any other comments this evening? Great. Steve?
Ben, if
Great.
you are making a proposal to direct staff to find a way to incorporate the 90-day, a legal way to incorporate the 90-day rule, I would support that. So I don't know if that's what we're trying to get at, if that's what you're trying to get at.
If we need an official proposal, I would be happy to support it.
You're welcome to make a motion if you'd like at this time.
May I?
Yeah.
I would move to ask staff to draft a proposal to define long-term rentals as stays of 90 days and above, and also to require a license number in the rental listing of all short-term rental properties.
I'll second it.
Any other discussion on what's been proposed or directing staff to look into this for us?
Couple comments, I guess. I am hearing from staff that the 90 days is problematic, and I understand that, but I guess I would support the motion just to see what maybe would come back to us in some way, shape, or form to maybe make it work. I'm not saying that I would ultimately support that. I'll support the other portion of it, obviously, to add the short-term license rental number, license number to any listing, and I think we could also probably require people in their property description along with that to have the disclaimer that it says all short-term compliant licensed properties in Whitefish are required to provide this number. That could be a simple asterisk number. And I think we would require that on anybody's website is compliance with our, so that way anybody's reading through, they're gonna see the license number and they're gonna go, oh, that one doesn't have one. My big concern though with short-term rentals is I'm afraid that we're running at a large structure fire with a garden hose because there's 3 to 4 times the number with our immediate vicinity of what is actually in town. And I agree with you, Ben, that if we can bring 1 or 2 units back in, and Ryan just pulled one up that we know is not in compliance in his own right, we just looked at pictures of it a half hour ago, that is wrong. So I still think we really need to focus and figure out a good way for enforcement. I hear the anecdotal stories constantly from people, my neighbor's doing this, my neighbor's doing that. I'm then like, you know, we're a kind of complaint-driven system here. Then file a complaint, call the city, call planning. But it doesn't happen, so then I kind of wonder, am I hearing a lot of anecdotal things that are maybe not really happening? Do people just think that's happening a lot? You know, and then coming back, and it all comes back around, is we're trying to deal with the affordability of housing in this community and its workers for service jobs. We also need to come to grips with the fact that nationwide, the mass exodus from service jobs as a result of COVID is a real phenomenon regardless of housing. So I hope that the business owners don't think if we build a bunch of apartments, suddenly they're gonna have full staff. It's not gonna happen. I mean, I will give you an anecdote. This is not an anecdote, this is a true, someone went to work in a food establishment. They worked the first 2 hours of their shift. They said to the head chef, how long is this shift? I need to sit down. It's like, well, it's 8 hours. Oh, really? Can I get another $2 an hour? And then they quit the next day. That's part of the state of the service industry. That said, there's a lot of super dedicated, hard-working people in this community that work. But there's a lot of jobs that are empty, not simply because of housing. And some are, and I fully understand that. But I just don't want us to think that we're gonna fix all these problems. And, you know, and I mean, Ben, you are correct, money is gonna be a big issue. But if we take a look at the kind of dollars it actually takes, I don't know where those dollars come from. We could dedicate 25% of what we collect in resort tax revenues every year, and we'd maybe create 5 units. That doesn't fix the problem either. And so I'm kind of coming around to thinking it's like maybe we really need to think about this kind of valley-wide, not just Whitefish, not just Kalispell, not just Columbia Falls, because we do see properties that have a little more affordable value that aren't necessarily in the 3 incorporated municipalities. And maybe we start to think about a decent mass transit system to get people to and fro. And I mean, I'm just afraid that we're really trying to create something that's just not creatable for people long-term here. And the other thing I think we need to really start doing, I've gone longer than I really should have because I have a few other things when it gets to me, but when we went through the housing needs assessment, and Ben, you know that thing forward and backwards like I don't, but it was all, well, we want to create single-family housing. That's what people want. That's the demand. I think we're all coming to the realization that that's definitely not going to happen. I mean, just given land values now, we're not going to build that single-family house that people want that's going to be at 80% of AMI. It's just not going to happen. So, I don't know. I just hope we don't continue to kind of chase the same tail of the dragon we've been chasing around for a long time, and we really do start thinking broader. And that's why I suggested recently, let's write a letter to the governor, invite him up here to speak to us and say, look, we philosophically disagree with your signing the House Bill 259, but it doesn't get the problem fixed, and we've waited for 20 years in this community to have the problem be solved by the market. The market hasn't done it. The market has destroyed it even more. So I think we just got to really, I'm for every last little thing that'll bring one or two houses in, but I think we got to really wake up and kind of look at this in a little bit bigger, broader perspective. So, but I'll support your motion. That was really way too long-winded. I apologize. So.
I thought it was perfect, actually. With respect to Ben's motion, do you guys have, I think we have support for everybody wanting to look at what we might be able to do, Angie, and is there any, I mean, can we set this up for another couple of weeks or a month from now to where we can have something to look at?
We'll look at the work session. I think this needs a work session, and I'll give you my explanation why. I'm hearing two issues. One is we have too many STRs right now, registered even, maybe. We have property potentially looking at developing right outside our city limits. Most of the STRs are outside city limits. You think about annexations, we'll be bringing a lot of STRs into the city. I think that there are two issues here. One is, you know, we allow it by district, resort, residential, and I can tell you that Mayor Mulfeld shared with me, I mean, he would be supportive of a moratorium on STRs, but in a community where we have, you know, commercial WB2, yeah, commercial, they can build a hotel, no big deal, right? But you look at resort residential areas, and do we need to look at a cap on those? We had brought this information forward 2 years ago with different alternatives for short-term rentals, and nothing wanted to be done. So we can prepare the 90 days language as much as we can. I think Angie's gonna say we're gonna have a challenge with it, regardless. We can try to come up with something, but the bigger issue, I think, is, you know, you've got two things. You've got an enforcement issue. Okay, well, what can we do to improve enforcement? We could hire staff. We just lost our front office person, by the way, so we are down a full staff position, and we're having trouble hiring it. I mean, we got to find somebody local. We aren't going to have somebody to be able to live here. I just talked to the county. They're looking at basically temporary housing for employees. They can't hire a planning director right now at the county. We're struggling, and even we're struggling. So the bigger picture here when we talk about short-term rentals is the 90 days, yeah, that's not going to fix the problem today, though. That's an enforcement issue because they're already not allowed to have them. Do we just put more money toward enforcement to address that? Again, the person that we had, you know, we'd moved a position from part-time to full-time to focus on enforcement. We lost that position right now. We're in the process of hiring it again. Hopefully we'll get candidates, but I mean, I think we got like applicant numbers on a handful basis, 5 applicants for a job that's full-time, you know, what we would say is good wages in Whitefish, with benefits and everything. So we can prepare something. We'll look at a work session though, because I think we need to also talk holistically about it and not just focus on the 90-day part when we talk about short-term rentals. So it looks like, ooh, well, that goes back to September for work sessions. So we could do it as part of a council meeting, but we don't have any work sessions available to September.
Is it a big enough issue that we would just have a special work session on an off Monday?
The mayor can call a special meeting.
Okay.
Well, I think we bring it to John's attention over the next couple of weeks and see what he wants to do. Dana, I like your idea, and I too agree that we need to look at this holistically. I think we need to look at the concepts of what we could do with, on a narrow basis, okay, 90 days, okay, is that something that we put in our quiver that we have, but that's not gonna solve the problem either anyway. As much as I like, if everybody complied, yeah, it might help us, but given what we know goes on in the marketplace, those that are cheating now are gonna continue to cheat, and they're not gonna care. And so I've got a problem with that, but I'd like for us to do that, and I think let's look at those work sessions again, and then come back to us on, next time and tell us what we might be able to do, or we'll speak with John as to whether he wants to try to put in an extra one sometime.
Yeah, Frank, if I can just chime in for a second.
Sure.
I mean, there really are two issues. One is regulating, STRs in areas where they're permitted. And I think you guys will remember, I think it was a couple years ago. I don't know, last year seemed like it lasted a couple years, but I think it was a couple years ago that we did have a work session, and Lauren talked about San Francisco's and, how they regulate it. And I think I gave you guys, just several examples of how to actually regulate legal STRs. I think that is a different issue than how do we regulate illegal STRs. And I will say, in the past year and a half, I definitely think it's an issue worthy of revisiting because things have changed.
Yep, I agree.
And Frank, if I could, I would like to back away from the edge just a little bit and make sure that we understand that this is not the only solution we're talking about for housing. This is just trying to deal with the short-term rentals that are illegal. I haven't heard much discussion about, we're worried about the ones that are legal, or there's too many, or any of that kind of stuff, other than we want them to become more official so that people who are doing it illegally understand that they're doing it illegally. So with that, are they required to post a certificate in their short-term rental that shows that they're registered with the city and all that stuff?
Only at the short-term rental.
Just the name and the address of a local contact has to be on the door. That's the only thing we require.
Okay, so we don't have like a certificate that you're an approved short-term rental in the
Yeah,
city?
we give them a short-term rental registration that we review and approve. I don't know if it's not a piece of paper, I'm not sure.
They get a business license.
Okay, well, it seems on the, taking what Andy's saying and what Ben is saying, that perhaps like in hotel room where it says, you have a certificate of occupancy or whatever it's called, that we have something like that that's posted in there. It could be part of the messaging campaign that we say, hey, if you're in a place that doesn't have this seal, you're in an illegal short-term rental. I mean, it's not just about the 90-day thing, it's about communication, it's about letting people know to be friends of the fish, and that's part of, I think, is a greater part of the solution. It's many things that have to happen all at once.
Right.
And just a little more direction, if we could take a look at our definition of residential in our code, that might be a place where we can work in the 90-day piece. And with that, I think we're all kind of starting to suffer, so I'll just be quiet.
Peace be with you. Dana, have you got the direction do you think you have some direction that you can deal with?
Yeah, we'll start working, on it. There's a lot more information, when we look at the residential definition. There was a bill at the legislature that barely did not pass about short-term rentals. So we'll bring some more information to you guys, and try to see if we can draft language.
Great, thanks. Ryan, any comments this evening? Andy?
I guess just one comment, kind of coming back to our earlier discussion of the event this past weekend, and I hope that the organizers certainly saw what didn't work and what did work really well, because there are a lot of things that worked great. I mean, ultimately, it was a great event. I mean, I have to admit, 27 hours of music in 3 days for myself was awesome. And it was too hot to drink much beer, so I was like, well, it's okay. But I think one thing we kind of lose sight of when we complain, and I'm certainly the neighbors out there complain about it and everything else, is this is in fact an economic solution that allows that property to not become the next Silverbrook Estates. And that was always the Vorman family's desire for that property, and I do know anecdotally that the Foremans are very happy with what's going on out there, because that is going to remain open space, and it's probably the only economic way it's going to be viable to do that, because it's not going to make enough money raising cows in all likelihood. It's just not big enough in today's market. So I hope that we all, as a community, can provide positive suggestions as to how problems that were perceived or real can be solved, and we can continue to have it, because it is a great event for this community. And hopefully with the event, when Nathaniel Ratliff is here on the 13th, which will probably be fewer ticket sales, be my guess, we'll get a little better idea, because as everybody said, Friday night was actually pretty nice. It was, and that was about the same number of people. Saturday was oversold. And Sunday was a little better. There wasn't quite the numbers there on Sunday. What's that? It was hotter. I think that's it. And I think a lot of people realized they didn't drink enough water and only beer on Saturday, and probably didn't rally till later. But, so I just hope we kind of keep those sort of things in mind, because, we can't have it all ways all the time. And sometimes we have to put up with some inconvenience, and we do it every powder day on Wisconsin Avenue all winter long now. We wait for, we were backed up to Highway 40 on the first big powder day this year, and people kind of complained about that, but they didn't yell, damn event out there, that's the problem. Nobody's like, wow, got to go ski powder today, awesome, had to wait in line for a while, but, So I just, let's always kind of temper our criticism, I guess, would be my sage words of wisdom. And other than that, thanks to fire department, certainly thanks to the police department and everybody else, and because I know it was taxing and trying, and I did talk to our guys out there that were manning the station, and I know there was a lot of anxiety going into Saturday by quite a few of them after seeing what was going on Friday night, and they're like, oh boy, it's going to be scary. So anyway, thank you, everyone.
And I would just like to add that to the extent I was offering criticisms earlier, my invictive of my hope is that we will solicit solutions, because I think it's a supporting thing for this community. In a lot of ways, I think businesses benefit by it. And so I want the community will embrace it if it gets fixed, that's for sure. And with that said, I don't have much other. I want to reiterate to the community that the affordable housing issue is one that this council, as a whole, to a person, is most concerned with. We are working and thinking about this virtually all the time and at every meeting. And so know that we have not let this thing go. And no, we're not walking away from it hoping for a better day. We're trying to work the problem. So with that, I will call this meeting to an end. Thanks.